Energy. It's our Thursday, October 24th meeting, which is our annual retreat. Maybe we can have a roll call. Brianna, are we okay for that? Roll call?
When I call your jurisdiction, please say your name. San Mateo County. San Mateo County.
Effie Milionis Verducci.
Going.
Belmont.
Tom McHugh.
Brisbane. Colleen Backer. Burlingame. Donna Wilson. Homa. Bailey City.
Thank you.
East Palo Alto.
Pedro Tomato.
Foster City. Halton Bay. Hillsborough. Los Banos. Menlo Park. Millbrae. Pacifica.
Tiger Jazz, Big Stick.
Portola Valley. Redwood City.
Martinez.
San Bruno.
Morning Medina.
San Carlos.
John Dugan.
San Mateo.
Adam Moran.
South San Francisco. Woodside. We have a quorum.
Fantastic. Do we have anyone participating under 80-449?
We do. Effie Verducci is participating via
Who is?
8449. Effie Verducci.
Oh,
Yes.
oh, thank you, Effie. So we will need to make a motion to, I'd like, if someone would like to make a motion to, allow Effie Verducci to participate.
So moved.
This is just cause under childcare and need for childcare.
Yeah.
It does, just cause doesn't require a vote. This is an emergency, sir.
Oh, just murder.
Yeah, and this would be just, and I assume that Ms. Verducci has not done it twice this year.
Yeah, that's great.
Good.
Okay, good, fantastic. So at this time, we'll have any public comment. This is a time for anyone to speak on an item that is not on the agenda. Due to the Brown Act, we can move, not respond, but we'd be happy to hear. Do we have any comments?
We have public comment online.
Okay. Go ahead and take that. We gave David tomorrow.
I'm sorry, I'm having a little difficulty here today. I know this is a long meeting, so I'm gonna keep it short. Good evening, Chair Colson, Vice Chair Medina, and esteemed Board of Directors and PCE staff. My name is David Morrow, and I represent the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers of San Mateo County. This morning, I had the privilege of attending Sustainable San Mateo County's 2024 Indicators Report. The report's topic was equitable paths to EV charging. The report indicated all the challenges associated with meeting the 2035 goal of 100% electrical vehicles in California. Even though we have made great strides, if the implementation rate of our EV infrastructure stays the same rate as now for the next 11 years, California will fall short of its goal. PCE staff member Melanie Jasper was on the panel and did an outstanding job of explaining PCE's EV Ready program. Melanie provided a report of the accomplishments the EV Ready program has already attained and what the future of the program has in store. Melanie was a fine representative of all that PCE does about greenhouse gases and climate change. PCE should be proud of the job Melanie did representing them today at the indicators meeting. She was outstanding. She did a great job, and it was very informative. I'm sure she'll have a report at some point to give you guys, but it was really well done. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very Mr. Morrow, for explaining and telling us. A lot of us have conflicts and can't attend every single thing in the county. And that is a wonderful report. We are very grateful.
Welcome.
Are there any other members of the public that have comments? We don't have any other public comments. Okay, anything in the room? If you are, Brianna will let me know. Good? Okay. Um. Moving on to action to set the agenda and to approve the consent agenda items, please. Is there anyone who would like to make a motion?
So moved.
Thank you very much, Mr. Director Lorraine.
Second.
Second by Director Romero. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
San Mateo County. San Mateo County,
Yes.
Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont,
Yes.
Brisbane,
Yes.
Burgundy,
Yes.
Colma. Daly City,
Yes.
East Palo Alto,
Yes.
Foster City. Half Moon Bay,
Yes.
Hillsborough. Yes. Los Baños. Menlo Park,
Yes.
Millbrae. Pacifica,
Aye.
Portola Valley. Redwood City,
Yes.
San Bruno,
Yeah.
San Carlos. San Mateo,
Yes.
South San Francisco,
Yes.
Woodside. Motion passes.
Okay. I don't really have a report because my report out is everything you're gonna hear for the work that we're doing the last after meeting. So I'll get through that and move directly to Sean Marshall, CEO report.
Okay, I'm gonna make this very brief tonight because we want to spend the lion's share of our time on our retreat items. But the big thing that happened earlier today and why so many of our fantastic staff is here, in addition to seeing you guys, for you all, is that we had our first ever CPUC electrification site visit, which was put on by the regulatory team. With able assistance from programs, marketing, procurements. And we had about 15 people from the energy division come down. We gave a presentation this morning. We then had 2 site visits. We had a couple of shovels out. We had 2 site visits, one to a customer who received benefits under our whole home program and has had his home electrified with clean energy. He was very gracious and gave us a tour of his property and what was working, and was very grateful for the assistance he's received. And we then went to an apartment building in San Mateo County that was serviced under our EV Ready program. And I believe there are 30 chargers in that property. And really the goals of the program today were policy thought leadership, really focused on affordable electrification. We sometimes call it right sizing, and really talking about the value in particular of scaling through level 1 charging. To educate about Peninsula Clean Energy and all of the metrics and work that we've been doing, the milestones we've hit recently, and to build sort of personal relationships off of a screen. And so I do want to just shout out Jeremy, his team, Shalini, programs, Raphael, everybody. Could we just have a quick round of applause and I'll show. Really time very well spent, and I'm gonna have a little show and tell. These are some remaining packets left over, so I'm gonna just send a few around if you wanna take a look at what we left with that. So thank you again for that. That was great. Just really quickly, all of this is in the report that you received. This is all of the activities that we have in the upcoming month out in our community. We are coming down to the finish line on the CEO briefings. Was very pleased this week to be at the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors and in Menlo Park. Mark will actually be covering Colma because it's happening right at the same time in Portola Valley. And then we'll move into January in Millbrae and Woodside, hopefully shortly thereafter. Couple of quick staffing updates. We have hired our call center team. I'm very happy to say that. Tip of the hat to Leslie, who's here tonight, and Stephanie. And so those folks started in the middle of October. There have been undergoing extensive training, and I believe Leslie, when do they start the actual call center? December. The cutover is gonna happen on December 10th, and we will then have our own official in-house call center. Thank you very much for your support for that, so we're very excited about that. I do also want to take an opportunity, you all have known about this, but I want to introduce Leilani Johnson, if you'll stand up, Leilani. Leilani is our new, director. He's our new director of people and culture, which is a position that you all know we discussed earlier this year. Very happy to have hired Leilani. She's been here now for 3 weeks and doing already an outstanding job for us. So that's been going well. Hats off to Cassius. Great. Cassius, are you in the room? Cassius is the wizard behind the screen. There it is. You can hear. Was promoted to IT manager, which is great. And we have one posted position for content marketing specialist that's currently. So that will conclude my remarks. Oh, I have one more show and tell. I'm going to just pass this around. This is Cal CCA's annual report that just came out, really covering a lot of last year, but some good stuff in here if you want to take a look while we are convening. So that concludes my report. I do want to add, if you don't mind, we made a mistake and forgot to put the CAC report on the official agenda tonight. So our apologies. We focused on the retreat. But I think Jason Middleton, there you are. Hi, Jason. He's going to give us a quick report. Okay.
Thank you. That was what I was going to say. That's half what I was going to say, but thank you. Good evening. Thank you, Honorable Peninsula Clean Energy Board and staff and Chair Colson. Delighted to share with you very briefly what occurred at our PCE Community Advisory Committee meeting on October 10th, 2024. In addition to a few housekeeping items that you can review from our minutes, here are the highlights. We received a robust presentation on Peninsula Clean Energy strategic options and planning from Shalini Swaroop, Chief Operating Officer, and Jana Kopachuk Lande, Associate Director of Innovation Strategy, and Lester Olmsted Rose from La Piana Consulting, who facilitated the discussion. We were presented with 3 critical questions to discuss, continue to think about going forward, as you will do tonight. I know you'll have that similar presentation, so I won't repeat those details, but I'm happy to relay more of our thinking on this in the future as we all continue to discuss the important strategic planning questions. That filled most of our meeting. We also heard from Vanessa Shin, Associate Manager of Community Relations, who announced the electric home tour that occurred last week and I heard was very successful. And from Kirsten Andrew Swin, Associate Director of Community Relations and Climate Equity, who invited and informed members about the Pacifica Electric Vehicle Expo, which I think is about to occur, maybe did occur. Okay, sorry. And we also heard from Kirsten as well about this retreat for tonight. So I think I've seen many of our members are here and probably more online. And if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I don't want to get in the way of your important work for this evening. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right, I'm gonna to any members of public comment on either the CAC or the CEO. All right, we're moving on to the definitive design, which is a big item for the evening. The organizational strategy for the energy strategic plan 25 to 30. We have with us Lester Olmsted Rose, partner at Lafayette Consultant. Shalini has been working on this, and Jana has been working on this as well. So they're kind of run the show over here in the corner. But I want to just set out a little bit of a framework for us as we look at this and think about it, especially relative to our first iteration of the strategic plan. So our first strategic plan was put in place in 2019. And when the organization launched very young in 2016, we were basically a startup organization, and we were operating, and we found that we needed a basic framework from which to make decisions. So that was when in 2017-18, we brought in our first strategic planning consultant, and we put together a plan that was fairly easy to comprehend. It had very understandable goals. It was comprehensive in the basics work that we were doing. But we at the time didn't have the multitude of programs. We didn't have the staffing we have now. capabilities or a lot of the other dynamic elements of our current sort of next generation organization. So that plan served us very well for the first 5 years. We've hired a different consultant this time, and one that I think has brought us a more dynamic processing system by which to continue the framework and develop our next 5-year goals. So as I said, or we said in the information we sent out to you, it's a very dense document. There's a lot of conversation and question and technical consideration. Fortunately, we have an amazing team here to lead us through this work. And so with that, I hope that just sets a framework, because I know many of you were not here when we did the first strategic plan 5 years ago. So that's the difference, and that's where we're going forward. Any questions? All right, if no questions, we're gonna just.
Actually, Sean,
Wait a minute, Sean,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm gonna
please, Sean.
quickly frame and then toss the baton to
Sure.
Tony, so you wanna add
Yeah.
that over there?
Nothing.
So I was asked to just provide a little additional context around the previous 5-year strategic plan, which will be concluding very soon. At our next meeting, we will be having a full report out of how did we do in that 5-year period from all of the different departments. So heads up, that's coming next month. And it was a real step in the right direction, very measurable plan, very specific goals. It aligned with all the departments, and it was done in a kind of more traditional, I would say, traditional type framework. And what we also realized is that it worked super well. Then the pandemic hit. We had to take a little time out on a number of things. The market definitely shifted. And we spent the last year having to amend, if you will, and kind of revisit and recalibrate some of the very lofty goals that were in that 2020 to 2025 plan. All of that was to the good, because I think we learned a lot through the process. Now today, what we're looking to embark on is something that is different. It's a different approach, and Shalini's going to walk us through exactly what that looks like. But it really focuses on providing the macro policy framework centered on a couple of key questions, and more may emerge, from which then staff will go back, put together goals, we'll come back to you. But really, it's meant to be a more dynamic, moving thing, as opposed to a static, specific 5-year plan. So it would be more like annual plans. I'm gonna fill in a little bit more, but don't know exactly yet how it's all gonna look. We're working on it, and it's been really interesting so far. I do want to call out the board subcommittee. It's an ad hoc committee that are 5 of you who've been working with us on this since, I think, August. And just thank you for your time so far. So with that, I'm going to turn over Shalini to teach us what we're up to, and then over to you, Lester. Thank you.
And maybe, so who was on that committee was
You and Director Medina, Director Lorraine. Yep, Ragsdale, and maybe Director. Oh, Director Bullock, sorry. Yes, thank you. And by the way, it's not sunsetted yet. We still need you a little bit. Okay, thank you. Shalini.
Sure, thank you. So we have been working with La Piana Consulting, and Lester will tell you more about that in a minute. And so they have an interesting and unique approach to strategic planning, and it's reflected in this pyramid here. So they start at organizational strategy, so mission, vision, value to the community. Then after that is set, we move on to programmatic strategy about approaches, programs, and activities that we want to do to meet our organizational strategy in the most effective way. And then last, we move on to operational strategy, the systems, policies, personnel, infrastructure, in finance, HR, et cetera, in order to sort of achieve the programmatic goals that ultimately aim towards the organizational strategy. So it's a different process. You know, many strategic plans look like to-do lists, like very ambitious to-do lists, and we will get our own ambitious to-do list, but that's not going to happen tonight. So the problem when you have these ambitious to-do lists is that you can miss the important strategic decision points that would orient the whole list in one direction or another. So that's really where PCE is right now. We're living in that blue triangle, and we're spending time wrestling with the top of the pyramid on what are the most critical questions facing the agency today. We're not just saying, okay, here are the next, 15 things we're gonna do. We're stopping and we're taking a pause and we're really saying, what is our business gonna look like over the next 5 years? And what are the most critical things that we need to know in order to move our business ahead in alignment with our board and our staff all together? This is an incredibly complex and technical industry, and we do have, board members rotating in and out. We have staff members coming on. We're really taking this moment to get us all aligned for the next 5 years. So with your feedback and feedback from other interested parties like RICAPS and the County Sustainability Office, staff will come back to the board in January to adopt PCE's organizational strategy, mission, and vision. So today is really an information point and a gathering point for staff and Lester to take in all of your feedback. So once our organizational strategy is adopted in January, staff will then work on the next layer of the pyramid, on the programmatic strategies aimed towards the adopted organizational strategy. So staff will create work plans to operationalize the program goals on an annual basis. And then we will start working on the operational work plans as well. So we will bring all of that back to the board in summer or fall of 2025. Unclear what sort of format we want to take, but we will definitely be bringing it back to the board for your information. Then we will begin a yearly cadence of annual work plans and after our 2025 transition year. As Sean said, our current strategic plan isn't done yet. So 2025, we're really doing the strategy year to go from sort of one frame to the new frame. I do want to note that the programmatic and operational strategies should change from year to year. That's why we're visiting them annually, because we hope that we will have achieved some of our goals throughout the year, right? And so organizational strategy should be resilient over the 5-year term. And if it needs updates due to market realities, we can do another mini process with the board and the staff. And so this yields a more adaptable and dynamic strategic plan that can respond better to market realities. Because right now, nobody anticipated COVID, right? And we're still working on a strategic plan that was envisioned before COVID. So the hope is with this more resilient framework that we will be able to better respond to market realities, human realities, political realities, staff realities, just changing dynamics in our team. So with that, I will give it to Lester. And I will just note before he starts that I don't know if Lester has other clients, because it sure doesn't seem like it. We work together very closely, seems like all day, every day. So I just really wanted to shout out. Thank you so much for all the work we did, especially our interested parties. It's been really fun.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna hire Shalini away from you. I thank you. To do our marketing. So, yeah, you explained that well, and so I'm gonna take this 2 minutes because I really want to emphasize a few things Shalini said. One is that so many strategic plans are a to-do list, she said. That's not the goal here. You want to know what your strategy, big picture strategy is. So these 3 critical questions, they give you your direction. And we're calling them here a strategic policy is how I'm thinking of it a lot. You're a public body. Your job is to adopt policy that staff can implement. And so I'm thinking of these 3 critical questions will lead you to adopting strategic policy. So kind of bigger picture. And then as Shalini said, then on an ongoing basis, you're doing the plans to adapt with new information annually or more often if you need. So I really want to emphasize that. And the other thing I really want to stress for tonight, you are not making decisions tonight. Tonight is all about thinking out loud. It's grappling, it's some education, learning about some of these issues that PCE has to grapple with, learning more about that, and then thinking out loud about it. Where are your values based on very limited information? Kind of how would you think about it? What's your approach? So no decisions tonight. So that's what I want to start with. I have this beautiful slide that explains our firm, but I'll just, for 30 seconds, La Piana Consulting, it was founded here in the Bay Area, but we're a national firm. We are not large. We have, I think, 18, 20 consultants, something like that, scattered around the country. We work only with nonprofit organizations, even though you're government, that fits, believe it or not, government organizations are nonprofits, technically, and I don't want to quibble with the attorney over here about that. He's giving me a funny look. So,
Everybody a funny
My
look.
face.
But this is what we do. We do strategy development. We actually were founded doing, as a research project to do nonprofit mergers. How do you do them? And we have a lot of intellectual materials out there that, that the field uses in a lot of different ways. So I won't say more about that. So we're going to jump in. These 3 questions were developed through a bunch of early conversations with a number of staff, with the ad hoc committee especially, and leadership staff. So we and some a few of your community partners, we had open-ended conversations, and these 3 questions that we're focused on are what emerged as really the most important. So we are going to move, just process-wise, again, I'll be quick about this. You can see what we've done. That's part of what I've said. We've met a couple times with the ad hoc committee. We framed these 3 critical questions. Those are really the most, some of the most important things. We had a really great all-staff retreat, which a lot was centered around these issues and a few others. And so all of that has shaped what you are getting tonight. Tonight we're getting feedback from you. And this month in early November, we're getting a lot of input into these 3 questions. And then what comes next is analyzing all that feedback, getting more information, and developing policy proposals for you. And now you get the agenda, but really what that agenda says now is we're going to talk about critical question 1, critical question 2, and critical question 3. And then you see a couple things at the bottom. We kind of want to introduce you to a few foundational ways of making decisions, foundational issues for you around what is your value proposition, and really your future value proposition and decision-making criteria. We don't anticipate much discussion there. That's more to familiarize you with this, because you'll see it later. Any questions about anything I just walked through? Otherwise, we're gonna, or Shalini walk through, because she really walked through it so nicely. Okay, good, thank you. So we are gonna start off here, and I think this is Roy's. I'm sorry, these are the 3 critical questions. Procurement, and I'm giving the shorthand, and then when we get into it, we'll go into more detail. The shorthand in my mind is, how do you think about procurement in terms of how do you prioritize procurement within your policy around affordability and other issues, such as reducing greenhouse gas. So Roy will do a much better job of talking about that. So procurement is the first question. The second question is around equity. And again, kind of how do you want to approach and think about the work you do to promote equity, and how that balances with your decarbonization goals and mandate. And then the other, I call this the existential question. The transmission and distribution and grid is changing, the world is changing. And are there new lines of business, or are there current lines? Do you need to think about adding new lines of business, or do you need to think about expanding some of your current lines of business so that you're going to remain really relevant into the future? So those are the 3 questions, and I'm not going to invite questions on this because, again, we're going to go into them in much more detail. There, now it's Roy's turn.
Okay, thank you, Lester. So on this first critical question on procurement, I think this board has been well informed of the challenges that procurement faces through our prior 24/7 discussion. So just to set the context a little bit, California has a piece of legislation called SB 100 that requires all retail sales from utilities to be zero carbon by 2045, 60% RPS by 2030. PCE, along with many other CCAs and low-carbon entities, are driving towards that decarbonization goal. And many of us are either already there or very close to getting 200% carbon free. That our carbon power content label for 2024 will be zero carbon. But as we know, the grid still has a lot of natural gas on the system. Here, it was 39%. The electricity is still served by gas. PCE has proactively set a target to do more than what the state mandates us to do. So our 100% renewable energy target on an annual basis by 2030 is well ahead of the 2045 zero carbon set by the state. And we'll be meeting 60% RPS starting 2025, but then 2030. In addition to that, we have our 24/7 matching goal. That has always been our mission. We have postponed our goal, but that's still one of our procurement priorities. And as we talked about before, there's a lot of challenges to meet these targets in this very high price environment because of increased demand for the clean products and because of many external factors that's driving up the market prices. So that's the general context. So what we're trying to balance here is, on one hand, we have a very aggressive sustainability target, and on the other hand is affordability. Before we get into the options for this critical question one, it's important for us to understand the terminologies. I know we went over this probably 4 times, but before we get to options, let's review them, and I'll turn it over to Sarah to go over the definitions first.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Matta, Senior Manager of Power Resources. I work for Roy. So I get to walk you through a couple of the technical terms. Many of you have probably heard these words before, but in case there's anyone new or wants a refresher, that's why we're here. So first word we're going to talk about is decarbonization. It's removing carbon dioxide from the electricity generation. We also talk about decarbonization on the building side, removing end use gas use. But in this context of question number 1, we're really talking about turning off natural gas power plants, decarbonizing the utility scale generation. Okay, we're going to talk about GHG, greenhouse gas free emission or greenhouse gas free energy or carbon free energy. That is either large hydro or nuclear in California. I guess there's also renewable energy sources, which can be GHG free energy. So there's some overlap in the Venn diagram. Renewable, we generally refer to the California's standard for what is renewable. That includes solar, wind, geothermal, biofuels. There's also some ocean technologies that aren't really commercially viable yet.
Small
hydro. Thank you, Rick. PCE has a policy not to procure biomass, but the state does consider biomass a renewable energy. So these are all different layers we'll talk about today. Let's see. We're also going to talk about generation. So as we know, PCE provides generation service to our customers while PG&E provides the poles and wires. But today we're just talking about procurement of the generation. That's the power plants that put the energy onto the grid. We will be talking about our power content label. That is the mailing that goes out to our customers once a year that shows sort of like the nutritional facts of our products. How much renewable, how much carbon free, how much emissions. Everyone has to send this out to their customers at the same time. So it's sort of like standardized across the state, and there are very specific rules that we must follow in how we format and calculate the numbers on that label. And then finally, our 24/7 coincident matching renewable energy goal. We refer to this as 24/7. We refer to this as hourly renewable energy. It's the idea that we're gonna match our renewable supply to our customers' demand hour by hour. So it's very closely matching, and this is kind of we're pushing the boundary of how people think about this concept. In our current goal, we don't have a specific number of hours we're going to match or percentage of each hour that's going to be matched. There's flexibility there, which we adopted earlier this year in April. We envision the future of 24/7 matching as an imperfect matching. We'll never get to 100% matching. It's much too expensive. It'll be some kind of partial matching. Some hours will be 100%, some hours will be less. Okay, that was a lot. Roy and I are happy to take your questions on definitions, if there are any.
Explain what you mean by biopower,
So there's biogas and biomass.
because you said excludes, the power procurement policy excludes biomass.
Yeah, so our PCE policy is not to procure energy from biomass, but I think if there was a biogas facility, like a landfill gas capture system that then burns it, that would be acceptable.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There's a question.
Just for really basic, what is biomass? Really basic.
Mostly in the state, it's like trees that have been cut down, maybe for wildfire prevention, or sometimes just to generate woody fuel stock, and then you burn it and you generate electricity. You could also do it with trash or compost, but mostly in California, it's tree material.
Thank you.
Does it have to be burnt, or can it just decompose and create?
I'm not aware of commercial technologies that don't involve combustion.
Thank you.
I think we should get through each question. Go ahead.
I was gonna say the same thing.
Oh, fabulous.
Great idea.
No, I was thinking that you basically would go through the question, get all the comments from the board members, and then open it up.
And I just want to jump in. I'm so grateful for the board members who are asking questions, whether you feel like you ought to know the answer or not. We know how dense this is. We know that the field that the work that this organization does is not necessarily your area of expertise all the time. Believe me, I have been way behind, many steps behind, and rely on staff to understand things. So I just want to thank the folks who just spoke up, ask questions, even if you feel like, oh, I probably should know the answer to this, please do that. We knew that tonight would be a high level of education, so that when we get to January, you can have comfort that you understand what the issues are and what the proposals are before you. So thank you for that.
Just to follow, where would anaerobic digesters fall within the whole biogas? And is it something that we would consider?
I think that would be biogas if we were to capture it. And then I think if there's technology that's commercially viable, that could be considered.
It could be considered.
Yeah, it would be.
Thank you.
Yeah, biogas. Okay, so this is the sort of the catch-all for today's discussion purpose, the three options on the table for brainstorming. Option A is prioritize greenhouse gas reduction. And I will call this was the option before we adjusted our goal, where we pursue the 24/7 target as soon as possible. And I want to use 24/7 as a way to say that's one of the strategies to maximize greenhouse gas reduction. And there could be other ways that other utilities are pursuing, but it's an expensive way to do it, and it might not be feasible in the near term. And therefore, that's why we have recommended the board to postpone the goal, and now we're in option B, which is status quo. But before we get into details, if you notice 1, 2, 3, 4 in each of the options, they have the same 4 elements. We're just reordering them for the purpose of prioritizing. So under option A, we're prioritizing 24/7, renewable 100% annually, greenhouse gas free energy on an annual basis, and then lastly, affordability, which is sort of what we were pursuing before we adjusted the goal. And now we're under option B. We are still doing greenhouse gas free energy on an annual basis between now and 2030, right? Our power content label will have 0 emissions starting next year, and our Eco Plus product content will be composed of greenhouse gas free products and renewable products only. There's no emission, there's no PCC3 products as supply power. And then we decided that affordability is very important. That's why we moved the renewable goal, both goals, to until after 2030. So the prioritization when the board made that decision to postpone was that affordability is ahead of renewable 100% by 2030. And then by not setting a target date for 24/7, nor a time constant percentage for 24/7, we moved 24/7 to the last place. So that's where we are right now. Option three or option C is the most affordable approach, which is taking where we have right now in option B a step further towards affordability. We put affordability first, meaning we can sacrifice our product content label, which is the second one, greenhouse gas free energy, between now and 2030. And maybe we don't have to meet 100% renewable annually by 2030 if the market is so expensive that we don't want to purchase and you spend all our money to get there. And then lastly, 24/7, because that's the most expensive thing to do. Although it would be could create the most greenhouse gas reduction. So these are the 3 scenarios. Now we are in the middle. This is for brainstorming again. We can move to the left. We can also move to the right. But how do we prioritize? I mean, is it 1, 2, 3, 4 in the A, or 1, 2, 3, 4 in the B, or 1, 2, 3, 4 under C? So this is just kicking off a discussion, right? I'm doing it okay, right?
You're doing great.
Okay, so I think I'll just stop here unless anybody has any questions.
You have
and then
one-
we'll just,
There's one more thing.
oh,
You have this slide and then,
I don't think we do. I sort of spoke through this already.
okay,
Yeah.
so questions?
Yeah, let's go there. So please, Dr. Mack.
I hope I'm not getting you in the wrong direction, so you could say we'll deal with it later, but
Sure.
we've had a lot of power contracts delayed by connection difficulties. And loosely, we've heard over the past 2 years, 2027. So even if we continued on option B, would we not be able to reorder that slightly based upon things coming online?
We would, I think, if we stick with option B and put affordability as number 2, then we will always have the flexibility to adjust. Because every time we make this decision, affordability comes before 100% renewable. Then if it becomes too expensive, then we'll keep postponing. That's my understanding, and I'm looking at Sean here to get concurrence. But yeah, so that's why the priority is prioritization is important for our decision making.
And so are we still just loosely thinking, hoping, no crystal ball, 2027, we're gonna see more?
2030. Oh, well,
The connections to those power contracts that
yes.
still have not gone online.
Most of our, I think, out of all our portfolio contracts, only one major project has been delayed by about a year. Everything else has pretty much been on schedule so far. So the 2030 day, 100% annual renewable, I think it's still achievable. 24/7 might be challenging.
Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Holmes.
So I see in option A, you put renewable prioritize above GHG free energy, but for options B and C, it's flipped. And so my question is, could you kind of help visualize it? What does that look like in practice?
Yeah, so 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 for option A, if we say we pursue 24/7, more than likely, if we achieve a very high 24/7 percentage, we by default will be 100% renewable on an annual basis. And I think this is more of a timing thing because achieving 24/7 as soon as possible is probably not practical before 2030 anyways. So it's sort of, we're really just talking about 2030 and beyond at this point. Not sure if that answered your question.
So I guess if we just boil on the priorities to just two, right? Renewable above GHG free or GHG free above renewable.
Oh,
What does
I
that look
see.
like in practice?
I think renewable will be building new, signing more long-term renewable contracts. And then if not enough, purchasing PCC1 from the market to get to 100%, hopefully not by a lot. Then greenhouse free energy will be meeting our product content requirement for now for Eco Plus. So that to achieve that, you will be buying greenhouse gas free products from the market. So if we're saying that we want to do renewable first, that means we are sort of valuing renewable a little bit higher than carbon free. So we'll try to hit renewable in lieu of greenhouse gas free products. So it just means it's more expensive.
It's more expensive, and are the environmental benefits of renewal slightly higher with renewables?
I think that is subject to interpretation. At least the commercial value of the product is reflecting that the renewable is of a higher value product than greenhouse gas free product.
And it gets us closer to the 24/7 goal if that remains an important factor.
And because our 24/7 goal is a renewable 24/7 goal, not a carbon free 24/7 goal. Yeah, but I mean, yeah.
One more point about renewables is that when we sign a contract to build a new power plant, it's a new clean generation on the grid that's gonna turn off gas somewhere else. When we buy carbon free, we're just buying large hydro credits from a dam that was built 50 years ago. It's not gonna turn off natural gas on the grid. So that's why we really wanna push for more new renewable projects.
So I have three small questions. I'm trying to really make sure everything's untangled in my head.
Sure.
So I apologize if I'm going over something that was more or less covered already. Did I, first of all, hear you correctly that we're on track to be 100% renewable by 2025, or did I misunderstand that? By 2030. Okay, got it. Like I said, trying to untangle.
Right.
So my second question, and I read the definitions are clear to me, but for the sake of specificity, what kind of GHG-free energy is not considered renewable?
GHG-free products not considered renewable, large hydro and nuclear.
Okay.
Although nuclear is not available.
Nuclear is not available other than the ones that we got.
PCIA. Okay.
We didn't get the energy.
Correct. No, not the energy, yeah.
So my final question is, it kind of seems like renewable and 24/7 are grouped together everywhere on this chart. For the sake of deepening my own understanding, if no one else's, why not put renewable at the top and keeping 24/7 at the bottom and then filling in between? What's the flaw in doing it that way, I guess is.
Are you referring to option A?
Each case.
Well, each case, the B and C renewable is at the top, and then we'll try to fill the voids of the hours that don't have renewable with 24/7.
I don't see renewable at the top in any of these three cases. So if we were to start with renewable as number one.
Oh, as number one.
And then maybe move 24/7 to number 4.
Oh.
And if you notice, they seem to kind of be paired everywhere they exist on this chart. So if we decouple them and stick renewable at the top, 24/7 at the bottom, and then negotiate the other two, is there a fatal flaw in that line of thought?
So if I may, just briefly, and then please continue. What we tried to do with these three options is, option A is the highest environmental benefit as quickly as possible. Option C is affordability, the cheapest power you can get, and still meet your legal requirements. So we tried to have those two extremes. I would be very surprised if you say, let's go to one of those extremes, because it doesn't get what you want. So the real conversation is the ordering of those four factors in some version of option B, which is what you are raising.
Exactly.
So
And,
just so people understand, that's kind of how we were thinking about this.
and while trying to think of what balance might mean in looking at the
Right.
iterations that are not on the screen,
Right.
I'm wondering if there is a flaw in looking at that as a potential balance.
Right.
Or if, no, clearly that could not be a potential balance for a reason that I'm not seeing.
Right, which would be
inherently.
some different version of that middle option.
Right, so
with
that's
that,
the question.
with that, Roy, I don't
Can
know
you
if you
Thank
can
you.
respond.
That's the question.
I think you can, if you put, so let's take option B, for example, if you move renewable to number one. And then GHG free and affordability, I think it's just a matter of cost. If you want to do 100% renewable instead of GHG free, then it's just cost.
It would be more
expensive. You would reduce more, like Sarah said, if we contract for more new renewable assets on the grid, then it would displace more fossil fuel.
And I guess in the conversations we've had in the past, I'm looking at 24/7 as being the most expensive
Mhm.
of the four. And so as I'm trying to understand what those different
Right.
price differentials look like, if you put renewable at the top, sure, more expensive than, but is it less expensive than if you put 24/7 at the top is
Yes,
what I'm trying to understand.
It is it's less expensive, that renewable 100 annual goal is less expensive than the 24/7 goal. I think on a fairly significant magnitude. The one thing I want to point out, just to kind of make it clear, so we don't get completely lost in the numeric ranking, because at the end of the day, Roy's team has to do its job based on what the market is doing, right? But I think option C, and what I'm really interested, and I think we're all interested to understand the board's perspective on this sort of recent entrant and more recent discussion around affordability, which really translates to customer rates. And where are we? Where are you all with respect to affordability in that prioritization? Option C slows us down on our environmental goals. Potentially, even I heard you say possibly that we could slow down on the 2030 goal. There may be some reaction to that. And so I feel like, to simplify it even more, it's really like, where are we at right now on affordability? Juxtaposed to all of the other bogeys that we have to meet vis-a-vis our mission. Is that fair?
Yeah, we'll go first with Director Nash. What sort of affordability difference are we talking about? What would that impact be to the resident as far as real costs?
Yeah, I think you did some numbers, right? Estimates?
Yeah, so the other consideration here when we talk about option C is whether or not we still want to be at least meeting the state mandate, right? Because the state does have certain RPS requirements. So assuming we still try to meet state RPS, and we don't have precise numbers, but we're talking about tens of millions of dollars a year, with not having to procure GHG-free products in today's market or renewable products in today's markets.
And how does that translate? I mean, I think the recent math is it's around 5 million for every 1%. Is that correct still, Nick?
Yep.
Wherever you are, okay. So, but again, I don't wanna get too trapped in that, to say, you know, we go with option C, then it's an automatic 5% discount or whatever, because things always change. So it's really the bigger picture.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead. What I'm wondering though is there enough there for the customers to even be discussing it?
You want to answer?
I think so. I mean, if the math is what Nick said, then yeah.
Especially, it's a regressive problem too, right? Because the lower income you are, the more impactful that cost is versus a high income person who has. It's price elasticity of demand. The lower income people are gonna be a lot more sensitive to pricing than the higher income people.
But they're also the people who are most impacted or will be impacted first by climate change. Typically.
So I'm capturing it. One of the questions we're gonna pose to you is what information do you need? When a policy comes back to you as a proposal. And so I'm actually capturing your question as information you'll need. Yeah. Like, what is that affordability? Like, what is the difference in affordability for those three environmental benefits? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I just want to quickly add to what Director Nash was saying. In my mind, I feel like what we're talking about is, in addition to the terms that were defined, it might be good to have affordability there as another term to be defined a little bit. And it's like, when we look at this, are we talking about, as was discussed earlier, pursuing, the lowest cost energy with option C, or are we still sort of thinking about achieving something like a 5% target underneath PG&E and having that be kind of, or something like it, the definition?
Director.
Yeah, I want to explore the issue that Sarah brought up about the comparison of GHG free energy versus renewable. And you said that renewable energy reduces natural gas use and GHG free doesn't. And is the reason for that because the GHG free is not energy that we can enter into a long-term contract for? Because if we could enter into a long-term contract for it, I don't know why dependence on that energy wouldn't reduce natural gas use.
Yeah, I was trying to get into the concept of additionality, which was actually a definition on our original list, but we pared it down for sake of, reducing the materials you had to review. But I think an existing solar plant and existing large hydro dam, both, they don't do much to reducing emissions on the grid. When you build a new resource, a new clean resource and add it to the grid, that's when you get those emissions benefits.
Yeah, but that doesn't calculate in the emissions to build that go into building the new grid either.
Sure.
There's pre-construction emissions, building it in China, shipping it here. There's emissions going into a new grid too. It's like the new car versus the old car conversation too, right? Like drive your old car, which maybe isn't as energy efficient versus buying.
Well, for power plants, we're assuming that they're built and they're gonna generate whether or not we have the contract or not. So it's sort of like there's a pool of emissions credits and we can buy from that pool, or we can create new credits by building a new resource.
Assuming there's additional demand and that the scale of electricity needs to grow to accommodate demand.
Yeah, and I think you can be confident that there is because there's still natural gas serving load in California.
Exactly. So okay. And Director Camaro?
Yeah, I think a piece of information that I would need, I mean, I can opine today how I feel about this, but in the parlance of the street, so do our customers give a rat's behind about the GHG piece and have we found that out? So yeah, or the renewable piece. So I mean, if we have a customer base that at this point is focused on economy,
yes,
right? I want to know that.
Yeah.
Because that would inform whether, for the next 5 years, we looked at an affordability approach, or if there was some subset of B that would meet the affordability approach yet still try to get something. So I don't know if we've pulled for it.
An interesting thought process on that might be the difference between Eco 100 and the regular product. In Burlington, we tried to push the Eco 100 product, and the demand was, people were not willing to trade up to Eco 100 we literally did a massive marketing campaign and we could not get a conversion. And then I guess you also looked at the city that has the highest opt-out rate, which is Portola Valley, which went 100%, Eco 100, and they got like 15% opt-out, I think. There's a whole city, it's like Portola Valley. But anyway, that's opt-outs. So we're, so right now it's about a 94%. Oh, okay, so they're higher, yeah, they're back up, so they're, and that's a wealthy community, right? Like wealthy community where price sensitivity is not gonna be the same. But anyway, I'm just wondering if there's any sort of. My evidence is anecdotal, of what we experienced when we did it in Burlingame. That there was not a huge demand by the consumer to, when we said we're gonna give you carbon-free, greenhouse gas-free, 100% renewable, but you have to pay more. No one wanted to convert. The only people who converted are the, like, people like me, the environmental people or whoever. So,
I don't know if any, but
I don't know if there's any survey work we need to do or some additional data we might need to find to understand the price sensitivity.
Just a comment on what Carlos is saying. I think you made a really great point. The part that's hard to discern is we still have a lot of customers using gas. And so that pressure on price could be driven by, they still have a gas furnace, and they've got a gas water heater, maybe they're using PCE electricity, but they're looking at the price they're paying PG&E, and that's gonna drive their sensitivity to cost.
But that's totally different because that's the issue that Sarah brought up about electrification in terms of house or business versus generation. And this gas issue is dealing with natural gas to generate electricity.
Yeah.
So it's really different than what we use in our homes or our businesses, and we certainly do use gas. But I want to explore this issue more because if we're contracting for power that we're buying, whether it be renewable or GHG free, that means for the time that we're able to purchase that power and deliver it to our customers, we're not buying system power. Which means we're buying less natural gas generated power. So I don't understand why that's not, maybe it's not additionality when you look at the whole market, because if we buy that GHG free energy, or if we buy the renewable that we're not generating, but that we're buying on the market, somebody else doesn't get it. And maybe somebody else then has to buy the system power. But from our perspective, it seems to me what we want is to address that system power that we're being forced to buy because we don't have either GHG free or renewable power or the time that we have to buy that system power. And when we were totally focused, I mean, this is more getting into comment than question, but when we're totally focused on 24/7, we weren't really looking at that and the impact on costs, which is this is putting that issue directly in front of us, which I think is good. But it still seems to me that if we're choosing to purchase power that isn't system power, but is either GHG free or renewable, that it will displace our need to buy system power as long as we're taking that power and delivering it during that time when we would otherwise be buying system power. And that seems like a good thing.
Oh, sorry, Jeff had his hand raised.
Oh, okay,
Just here.
okay, oh, great, Director Ops has come in. So Director Ops and Director McHugh,
I have comments, not questions, so I can wait until, if we're doing questions right now and then comments later on.
we're doing kind of both.
Comments are good.
Okay, a couple of things. To address Carlos's point, we have both. We have a subset of customers who are very price sensitive and we have three things. We have a subset of price sensitive customers, a subset of, eco warriors who want to maximize our green power potential, and a bunch of people in the middle who are either indifferent or kind of on the fence. The best way we have of kind of bifurcating those customers is to offer more deeper discounts to our Care/Fair customers and pursue more renewable resources on behalf of our, I'll call them market rate customers. So I don't know how, it's not a perfect delineation, but there's a way there's a very crude way of differentiating between those two sets of customers. I mean, the other one, in terms of additionality, if we pursue the, hydro, and there's not going to be any more large hydro in California. There's not going to be more nuclear in California. There will be more solar and wind paired with batteries. Every time we contract for a new resource there, we are allowing a gas plant to go offline. Every time we contract for a hydro plant or a nuclear plant, we're really just kind of we're dividing up a pie that's never going to grow. So, I mean, my general feeling on this is I'm probably leaning towards putting, looking at option B. I would probably put, I would leave it as it is, but I would swap renewable and affordability and pursue more renewable, more fully renewable projects. Knowing that they might increase our costs in the short term, but that they will actually improve our affordability in the long term. I think that's all I have for the moment.
Thank you.
Actually, just really briefly, if I just may, continue to ask questions, continue to react. I just wanted to say that the director who just spoke from Portola Valley did a great job of modeling, because we are curious now, based on way too little information. Kind of what is your sense? Like, how would you approach the balancing of these 4 issues? We're trying to get a sense of how you react to these ordering of these 4 issues. So thank you, Director, for that modeling. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem. I'm Director McHugh.
Yeah. I'm wondering if there's maybe kind of a short-term versus long-term equation in terms of GHG free versus renewable. GHG free is like, that's right now, that's bad stuff going into the atmosphere this minute, so that should be really high priority. Renewable seems like the kind of thing we've got a little bit more time to deal with. So if there were, kind of a decision that had to be made where we can acquire something, it's GHG free, but it's not really renewable today, that would be imperfect, but maybe good enough, because we've just got a little more time to deal with the renewable question. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, and so I think what you're then saying is the options as I laid out now, Tom, right, Director McHugh?
Yes.
Greenhouse gas free is your top priority. Affordability still favors in there, but then renewable comes below. But if pricing drops and affordability becomes more, like you're saying, it's dynamic, right, over time.
Yes.
So we're dealing with a point in time today, but over time, you guys may have different pricing models. Things may get less expensive or more expensive. And giving the staff a little discretion within a framework seems.
I'm not saying one's necessarily more important than the other. It's just a question in time,
Right.
temporal terms. One seems a little bit more immediate.
Yeah, I think that is reflected in option B, because we are going to phase out greenhouse gas free energy by 2030 if we are pursuing 100% renewable by 2030. So, we're really talking about 2025 through 2030 that we will be purchasing greenhouse gas free products to meet our power content. So renewable is more of a medium, I would say medium long-term approach. Now the challenge here is when we are signing power purchase agreement for renewable now, the projects are not coming online until 2030. So we're making procurement decisions for projects that are going to come online in a time frame that we're talking about here. That is not to say if we wait until 2030 to buy, there won't be any project available, say in 2031. There may be still projects there, but we're just taking a chance at that time.
Okay, I'm gonna grab Director Dugan.
Yes, thank you. I'm just wondering if there's a embedded assumption in the affordability, whether we're talking option C or affordability across the board, and that's because I think what that really is lower price, right? Which means we're assuming then we would pass that on as lower cost to our ratepayers. But if we think of it more as lower price than affordability, we could do other things with it. Like, for example, increase our rebates and our programs to roll out rebates. And there could be an effect on that, would balance affordability as a more favorable option. And I'm wondering, do we have any, is there math behind that would help us think through that?
Okay, but I think the problem is the cost of the electricity to us is what we're talking about, right? So if the cost is higher, then we have fewer dollars to give rebates or do things. And is that right?
That's right.
Right, but
It's
if we
avoided.
prioritize affordability, aren't we talking about affordability to our ratepayers? Isn't that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, maybe it should be lower cost to us is what we're prioritizing.
Yeah,
Because
I see
then
what
we
you're
can
saying.
choose to do net
Spend your
positive
money
things
different.
with it, like encourage electrification
Yeah.
in our own districts.
Yeah.
So what we were talking about is if we choose option C or something that's more affordable than the status quo, the amount of money that we save, how do we spend it? Is it to reduce rates, is to put in programs?
Yeah, I think you make a really important point, which is affordability to whom? Like to the
Yeah.
organization, for us to be cheaper, and then we still keep our discount PG&E, or is it affordability as in the lowest possible price we can charge a customer and still continue to operate the business?
Yes, and my question, I guess, is if we do lower our own costs and hence we have a larger margin, how effective would those dollars be on driving electrification? And how does that compare against these other options, 24/7 or, greenhouse free?
Good observation. Oh, yes.
Just some questions that would go on the, what else do we need to know list? And it's a
Yeah.
question that maybe is for Raphael and the team as well. Which is there any way, and I realize it's an estimate, but is there any way to quantify option A, B, C from a kind of GHG reduction impact? So if we followed your thread, which I think is a really interesting concept, and we said, okay, we put affordability at the top so that we can spend money differently and serve our customers differently through more program rebates. The question I would have is, can we put some framing around the GHG impacts of each of these, knowing that A is probably the highest? I think we can all, that's where we had been in the past, and we know that's expensive, so is that possible? In a general sense, Rohan, you're gonna kill me. That's
With a lot of assumptions, one can make estimates, it's extremely challenging.
Yeah.
Is that something that matters? That's a question.
I think we're looking at two different scales, right? I mean, option A, we're talking about greenhouse gas reduction, entire grid. Option C, if we do have, we keep the rates the same, we have a larger margin, then we can do probably more electrification, more programs, so that's more of a customer-sided benefits and greenhouse gas reduction on that side of business. So we're really talking about two different things here, depending on our ultimate objective. And that's why we're having this discussion.
Yeah, I wanna go Kaya and then Rick and then there, and then, so we're not
And-
here till like 10 or 11 o'clock.
Yeah, and I'm tracking time, so we have about 5 or 10 more minutes on
great.
this.
Given that this is a 5-year plan and strategic and the top of the triangle, I just wanted to put a little bit of context, at least from my understanding, which is, and then again, this would be from MIT, the simulator that shows that the single most effective, no question, is economy. If you put carbon pricing,
If you price carbon for its actual price, then that is the most effective way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So carbon pricing is where it's at. The European Union has already done it. Of course, California has done it just within its California. But I just want us to keep our eye on the ball that the price that people pay influences their behavior. If you know, flying a private jet, you don't say, no, you can't do it. You just say, you have to pay the price for the carbon that you're emitting. That will reduce carbon greenhouse gas emissions more than anything else, according to MIT's simulator. So I guess just lastly, I would say that given that the European Union already has done it, I believe Canada did it. The state of Washington recently did it. No one disputes that carbon pricing is where it's at. So it's possible that within the next 5 years, the United States will implement carbon pricing. And I just think we should.
Depends on who lives on the government.
Well, right. I said possible. I didn't say inevitable, but it's something that we should price in. I favor option B. That's just me.
Thank you. Okay, let's go. And then we'll go back to.
Okay, so 2 comments. Number one, just to level set, the issue of affordability, I think what Director Dugan said is right and should be considered, but the issue has really come before us because of our reorientation to be customer centric. And every time we go to our customers, it's not that some want greenhouse gas free and some want the cheapest energy and there's a huge middle. Almost all of them want cheaper energy. That's what we've gotten back. That's the feedback we've got back from our customers. And yes, we are focused on being greenhouse gas free and really addressing this climate issue. And that's really important for us. But it's easy for us to do that as directors but we have to pay attention to what our customers care about, number one, and that's cheaper power. So.
I mean, is it really cheaper power or cheaper distribution, right? I mean, we're
well,
not
it's
below
both, but and the generation is only 1/3 of the power bill.
Yeah.
So we're not able to touch the distribution.
But that's my point. I think.
But that's what we touch. So, okay, so number 2, our assumption of 24/7, which I think 24/7 is really important, but I think we have a flaw in our analysis, which is our definition of 24/7 is 24/7 renewable. I think our definition should be 24/7 GHG free. That's much more affordable. And it's in the 24/7 dynamic where we start to replace carbon rich electricity with carbon free electricity. And that's a dynamic we can impact. I mean, the idea of getting to renewable 100% by 2030 is a pipe dream. It's not going to happen. What the contracts we enter into now, we're going to start getting delivered the power in 2030. We're not going to be 100% renewable by 2030. I think that's not a good goal for us. I think a more important goal personally, I think, is for us to focus on 24/7 GHG free energy. And, you know, I like for me, I could go with B or C because I hear the customers and I hear it all the time when I talk to people. They want less expensive power. It's essential that we be at least 5% below PG&E. And I agree with with what we put in force in the last year with respect to the financial community. We did the right thing, which we said we'll raise rates if we have to, which we should do if we have to, but we should do everything we can to avoid having to. And that means really listening to the customer. So for me, I don't care whether it's B or C, but I would prioritize 24/7 GHG free energy. I think that, I mean, I don't think that that's going to be achievable by 2030, but it's more achievable than being 100% renewable. And it's a lot less expensive.
Do you have the?
Right.
Oh, so, I still think achieving 100% renewable by 2030 is achievable. Not all with long-term new renewable resources, right?
But it means overbuying and selling and retaining the recs and selling off the energy.
No, talk about 100% annual, right? Not.
Yeah, annual.
Talking about, okay.
Yeah, so it will involve buying some PCC one recs from the market, which is, yeah, it's still the best quality rec, but it's not from, there's probably no additionality benefit associated with that.
Well, it's a combination, is it not?
It's a combination, so we won't be at 100% renewable just based on our portfolio contracts by 2030, and I'm looking at Betty to confirm that. In terms of 24/7 carbon free, we can definitely look into that. I think that will be more affordable than 24/7 renewable. But it is hard to contract just like Jeff said, there's no new hydro in California, there's no new nuclear in California, so there won't be any additionality benefit. But we talked about that, whether or not that there's a benefit is subject to discussion. So there won't be that benefit, but it's probably gonna be more affordable than the 24/7 renewable. Because hydro is, there is more hydro, well, it really depends on the water year.
Yeah.
That it could be more than just renewable.
Thank you. This is a great discussion. I'm honored to be a part of it. I think to try and provide a model example, I think I'm currently pretty comfortable with option B. I feel like I'm between Director Alves and Director DeGolia. And in that, I think right now I feel pretty good with B. The way I'm at the moment, I wanted to share, like, I feel like I'm perceiving the priority not necessarily as being something we look at holistically with each decision, i.e. all four at once or something, but rather there might be like tensions between 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4 at different points. So I'm thinking of it that way when I look at option B, whereas like number 1, as Roy described, we kind of have already met. And yet there might be times when it gets more expensive and it already has. And so then we have this tension between 1 and 2 a little bit. Do we hold on to what we have, these goals that are higher than what are required of us? And at what point is it too expensive to do so? So I think as long as there's a little bit of, an opportunity for the board to consider, the tension between those two and maybe not always pick the highest one. As Director Alves mentioned, for example, there are opportunities to procure renewable energy that might be overall a bit more expensive, but could offer the potential to save later if we're, not having to buy RECs instead. So to me, I think that's a decent tension point. And if we could sometimes opt for number 3 instead of 2, with like some core ideas, because I think a few people have asked about, whether customers care about affordability. And to me, I think the very creation of Peninsula Clean Energy stands as evidence that at one point we asked the public, are you okay with us not necessarily prioritizing dollars immediately, but instead creating something that could offer affordability and a cleaner energy source, and they all said yes through their elected representatives. So I do think like getting too far to option C seems to strain against the idea of Peninsula Clean Energy and its mission and vision, the reason for its creation. So I think, but I agree with Director DeGolia's point about, I do think it's important that the affordability not get lost, and it really shouldn't be below 2. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just saying, not to be the apostate in the room. But I think I tend more to option C only because of the economic times we're in. And so I think affordability perhaps in these next 5 years should be something that we should be looking at. Again, attempting some balance, but I just, and Donna, you said it before, it's middle-class folks that are also talking to you about these issues of price, right? It's not just people of color, low-income areas, right? So I don't think we can ignore that. And so for me, you've asked where I fall as the apostate in the room. I fall more on the side.
Is,
Has a comment.
yeah, Director Ops, and then if that's okay, we'll take this, and then we'll let Vice Chair Medina speak, and we'll wrap it, is that okay? Do you guys feel like? And anyone who still has additional comments or thoughts, if you wanna email them to Sean, or Shalini, I should say Sean, is it okay to email to you? Maybe the repository for like, someone wakes up tonight and I'll say, send it to these two and they'll get it sorted, whatever. Okay, so Sean, I mean, Director Ops.
So, two last thoughts. In the retail electricity market, the overwhelming force, in my experience, is inertia. The average ratepayer doesn't look at their bills, doesn't change. I mean, we had a rash of opt-outs in Portola Valley at the launch of PCE because we had some people who were just mad that it was a government takeover and they didn't like it. It had nothing to do with price. It was purely like an ideological objection to somebody sort of forcing them into something new. And that opt-out rate is still a little high, but not that far out of line with other communities. Most people, if you ask them, they will say they want cheaper power, but if you just, very few people come to me and actually complain about cheaper power, at least where I am. And I realize I'm in an affluent community where people are not price sensitive. I think we have a large swath of price insensitive customers. And that gets to my second point, which is that, the 24/7 renewable goal, when we first launched it, was a leadership initiative, and looking at the electricity market beyond San Mateo County and what we would do to lead the state to the clean renewable grid of the future. And so, prioritizing, at least at times, renewable over affordable is a contribution we're making. And we are a wealthy county. We actually have the resources where I think we could balance some extra expenditures in pursuit of renewable electricity with affordability for our most vulnerable customers. It's been a question of leadership. And so, I still feel like it's important to keep pursuing and leading on the renewable front, especially and working towards that 24/7 goal. I don't want to go overboard in terms of, I don't want our prices to go through the roof, but I think that, I think there's a non-economic argument for pursuing renewable more aggressively.
Thank you, Director or Vice Chair Medina, please.
So in the last few years, I think the overall public has had sensitivity to the price, and PG&E is going to keep on raising prices. And so what are we going to do then? People are going to be upset already, and then we're going to go higher. So for the time being, I think our focus needs to be on affordability, because we're learning that's what our customers are most concerned about. And they probably couldn't tell you the difference between greenhouse gas free or renewable. They're not going to really care. Is it better for the environment? Okay, whatever. How much is it going to cost? I would like to see the delta for the price differences that as we would go forward for the different ranges that we have there, because we've seen it before. Over 5 years, it's $80 million to have this or 40 million for that. And when we have that, what do we do with the savings? We can put that money into more programs to help out those that need it the most, right? So I really love the discussion. There's no one answer here. We're not trying to get to the solution, but I think it's great that we just have to remember about the price. I mean, that's the majority of our customers. I bet you for sure that's what they're concerned about. So that's what I gotta say.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Do people need a break, or everybody okay to go on?
Why don't you, probably tonight, why don't you? Yeah.
Oh, sorry, so yeah. So everyone, if anyone needs to take a break or get water, it's good time to do it while we'll take some of it.
We do have a public comment.
Hi, my name is Michael Clausen. I'm a member of the Community Advisory Board representing Menlo Park. I was going to reiterate the point that the last gentleman just made. there are two levels of affordability. There's the affordability for our consumers. And there's the affordability for Peninsula Clean Energy to run its programs. And you can make a point that overdoing focus on particularly I 24/7 will cut back our ability to fund our other programs, which are terrific programs, by the way. So I think that I don't know what you'd have to figure out, factor in the costs and benefits of the continuing programs or adding new programs versus a procurement. But I think it's worth considering that it's not a total loss to our mission if we cut back, if we increase the affordability of energy, but then put the savings into other good programs.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have another? I will close public comment. Oh, yeah.
We're actually gonna have to standard tonight and give a public comment.
Pardon? Oh, one more. Oh. Yeah. Okay. No one? Yes? No? Okay. It's okay to close public comment? Yes. Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment. And on to question number. Yeah, let's take it.
Yeah.
Can I go? We'll take that next.
That's why people are moving, let's take.
Take it. Rafael, you want to?
Let's see how Charlotte looks.
Yeah. Yeah, for many, this is a fun thing. I just post pictures of it. I were just showing.
Yeah, you can bear.
Oh, we're gonna see it. Yeah, I'll see you there. Oh, no. Yeah, but that's. Right.
It's actually fairly important.
Agreed.
I'm saying that it's using this, that actually. That there is no city that. It's just on our. But it doesn't actually produce any net GHG benefits. Yeah.
Great part.
All right, well, as a reminder, I'm just gonna reiterate critical question two, because it's not right here, and I feel like we need to reorient our brains after that very brain-breaking discussion. So, critical question is, how can PCE continue to deliver its programs and services within an equity framework while also scaling decarbonization? So I'm gonna give you all a lot of context on here, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask Raphael.
Well done.
So PCE invests in customer programs geared at decarbonizing homes and businesses while also considering equity goals. Currently, PCE invests approximately 25 to 30% of our ratepayer funded program budget towards serving low income customers. This means about 8 million a year. We expect to secure approximately 9 million more from additional public funding sources to benefit low income customers. So this is a lot of the work that Yana is doing. Examples are the self-generation incentives program that will give no cost storage and solar to folks in our communities. Equitable building decarbonization pilots that will do low-income electrification. And then we also, for the city of Menlo Park, are administering a $2 million CEC grant. This also does not include plans that we have to apply to administer more energy efficiency funding from the Public Utilities Commission. I do also want to note that our GovPD program does do some facilities that also serve low-income customers, like the San Bruno Aquatic Center that Marty was at earlier this week, or the South San Francisco Aquatic Center. So those types of benefits for low-income customers are not captured in this question right now, meaning you can address them, but know that we're really talking about our ratepayer-funded program budget. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. Thank you, Lester.
I did have one question if I could, just, how strongly tied is the amount that we set aside for, equity low income programs and the amount that we get from, public funding?
Nothing, one not related to the other.
Okay, so even if we had 0 from us, we might still be able to get 9. Thank you.
The considerations that we're including, but are not limited to, that's our favorite language, is the extent to which PCE should serve all customers regardless of wealth segment, which with accessible programs to maximize impact and decarbonization. Like I said before, the extent to which PCE should focus its ratepayer revenue funded energy programs on equity customers. And this kind of gets into we're using equity customers as an umbrella term, which I'll talk about next, but there are lots of different types of equity customers. So, you know, we want to be thinking about, are we addressing historic impacts of the fossil fuel production economy? So this would traditionally be people who live near gas plants with high rates of asthma. There are no gas plants in San Mateo County, but there are highways, and the people that live near highways are affected by fossil fuel infrastructure, right? Increasing access to customers that have traditionally been underserved by programs. This has really been renters for our programs. There, a lot of programs are geared towards homeowners for electrification. Renters don't have the authority to make changes to their homes. So that's an underserved population. The extent to which PCE should focus its funding on delivering disproportionate benefit to low-income customers. This is a low-income customer. There's actually a statewide definition for that. It's 80% of the area median income. And then reach customers in disadvantaged communities. This is also a statewide definition. There's a tool called the Cal EnviroScreen 4.0 that maps out disadvantaged communities throughout the state. We have less than 10 in our service area. And then also one final consideration is the right balance between improving affordability for low income and equity customers through rates versus energy programs. So something we did, well, you all did in December 2023 was provide $300 care and fair rebates for our customers, for $300 rebates for our care and fair customers. Also, you froze our rates, giving a 10 to 15% discount to all of our customers. So those types of initiatives aren't covered under the program's budget. Right, but so I want us to be thinking about the totality of the way that PCE serves their equity customers and low income customers. Next slide. A little bit more additional context. PCE developed a diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion framework in 2022 that outlines our commitment to accessible and inclusive policies, programs, and practices across the organization and within all of PCE's work streams. This question only addresses a very small portion of the work that's encompassed in that DEI framework. And lastly, actually, I'll kick this to Raphael shortly, but serving equity customers via programs tends to be more expensive on a per capita basis because those customers need more money essentially to implement the same decarbonization measures that general market or middle or high income folks would be able to provide on their own. So Raphael, can you provide an example of that just to make it all a little bit more concrete?
Sure. So, and the implication being that there's a trade-off or a tension between greenhouse gas reduction, scale and speed versus equity serving programs. And as we know, of course, climate impacts ultimately are disproportionately going to fall on the most vulnerable. So there's kind of a future and current tension here in terms of how programs operate. To Shalini's question about how this plays out in programs, just to give one example, we have a general incentive program for building electrification, so heat pump water heaters and heat pump HVAC systems. We have roughly since 2002, when we launched the program, roughly had about 3,200 installations of heat pump systems across the county. Roughly $2,500 to $3,500 at various points in the various systems, but that's the range. And we also have a low income adder in that program. We get almost zero participation in that program for that low income adder. It's in the single digits. I don't have the number in front of me. And there are many reasons for that. One is certainly the renter segment, although we do work with property owners when they come forward to install systems. And of course, secondarily, our EV charging program is almost entirely in apartments. But that aside, so 3,200 units, again, mostly market rate participation. And the bottom line is that low income customers need a lot more support, both to reach them as well as the technical assistance, language issues, other barriers, even just getting in contact with them can be very, very difficult. And by contrast, our direct install program, which targets low income homeowners, is in the hundreds of units. But there we're talking about, with the new program that we will be rolling out, incentives for comprehensive electrification that are $35,000 for a home. Now, those are the extreme examples, $2,500, or to $5,000 to $35,000. But it does kind of clarify, how different the investments can be to actually get things to actually happen.
And so I think we'll move on to definitions and then we'll stop and have some questions before we move on to the options. So we are at PCE, we're using the term equity customer to kind of serve it as an umbrella for some of those subsets we already talked about. So underserved customers, the example, was renters, but this really will address any customers who've been historically underserved by California's energy programs due to income, wealth, geography, redlining, other forms of racism, language barriers, as Raphael mentioned, cultural biases or structural challenges. Low-income customers, that's the state definition of 80% area median income. In PCE service area, there's about 56,000 customers that are at or below 80% AMI. That represents about 20% of our residential customers. Low wealth customers, those are customers whose household spends are more than 30% of income on housing costs and are severely cost burdens, spending 50% of income on housing. So the difference between low wealth and low income is pretty interesting because there are some really wealthy people that don't actually draw an income. And so, and there are some retired people that have wealth but don't have an income. So but there's no real easy way to identify all these people. So low wealth customers are folks that we want to identify, but it's hard to figure that out without conflating it with low income. So I just wanted to draw a distinction there because this is something we're diving into more and more, but there's not a lot of data that we can work with. Historically impacted communities, these are the communities that I was discussing earlier that have disproportionately borne the negative impacts and burdens of fossil fuel production. And disadvantaged communities, like I said before, are a statewide definition from CalEnviroscreen 4.0. So I'll stop there for a moment and see if we have questions before we move on to some options we can discuss.
Could you show the disadvantaged community map if you have it?
It's not on the slide deck, but I'm happy to send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So one of the things that I struggle with is just, we have community members who have a house, and so they have assets, but have very low income. And just how to handle that.
That's this issue Shalini was talking about trying to parse the low income customers and the low wealth customers, and how do you?
And I'm not sure they fall into either.
Right, it gets very complicated.
But yet they have needs.
They might be underserved then in our sort of classifications.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right, because they might, like, you knock on precinct doors, right? And you knock on a door, and the person's very elderly. They're sitting in a house in Burlington, and if they sold it tomorrow, and sell for $2 million. But they have nowhere to go, that's their infrastructure, that's their family. So they're gonna stay, the house is empty. So that is a very difficult customer. And they're underserved because they don't have internet, they don't know how to use the Wi-Fi. They don't have good healthcare, they don't have access to upgrades. So I think that's where they become kind of worried, right?
And it's very hard to identify those people at a level where we can make programmatic impact, I would say.
Yeah, so we're actually to the point first that Chair Colson made, it's not unusual in our direct install program to go into a home and discover that somebody has not had heating for 3 years. So that's a very real thing. And we are, with the new turnkey program, we are putting a cap on home size. And we are asking for self-attestation of investable assets. So we don't have a way to validate that today, but that's a tool that we're starting to employ.
To bring it up, but we actually had public comment at our last council meeting on Tuesday about the investable assets and how the $500,000 cap was when looking to be able to retire and basically does not go very far. So it's complicated.
Yep. Any more?
There's a question.
Yeah. I think we're about to get into a discussion of what percent of our program dollars we may want to direct to low income. And so my threshold question is it somehow more expensive or less efficient to subsidize low income households on a, carbon saved per dollar basis?
Absolutely. Yeah, so we have, customers who are willing to do whole home electrification on $6,000 of incentives. And that won't be true for most underserved community members, where it either needs to be comprehensive or near comprehensive, and that's the $35,000 number I mentioned.
Okay, so it's definitely less efficient for us to do it, but total dollars spent might be the same on the program, whether they spend it and we spend it.
Well, no, we will get what's that? 1/4 of the GHGs for the same dollar.
Okay.
So if it's 35,000 for low income, we have to spend all 35,000.
Got it.
Versus 6,500.
There's another question.
Yeah, just a point of clarification, if it is a question, is the disadvantaged community map essentially the Callan virus screen map?
Yes. And I can add to that, I don't have the map, but I have the numbers we have around.
Yeah, no,
here. You know
we
that,
can call
right?
up the map. I have it up here. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure.
Yeah.
I mean, some of us have questions in the equity and kind of, you know, person of color, you know, environmental justice community. We have questions about the way EnviroScreen works. But the one thing it does do is that it really just point out where you have huge disparities in the valley, in the inland empire, right? And so for many of us, it's like, I don't think I want to mess with that too much because they really do deserve, right, to be in that area. And I know we've heard a lot of complaints about the map itself and the functions behind it, and you're right, then there are like 10 communities in the county, they're not many. So if you use that, you really limit.
Yeah. And state funding is given out on the disadvantaged community definition as well, so that's another.
But we don't use it much
Yeah.
outside of state requirements.
Yes,
Donna, we do have person Andrew Schwinn online and she would like to give a comment.
It's about the comment beyond.
Yeah. You want to, Kirsten, we're gonna, how about we wait until, let's let the board, we'll get through a little bit and then we'll call you in. Yep, perfect. Or it's up to you, Sean.
My difficulty right now is that we advised other staff members probably not, who are not. You know, so I want to be consistent.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you know, we want dialogue, so. I'm having a little trouble right now because we turned down 2 other people. And so we would be inconsistent. So, Kirsten, what I'm going to ask is the same that I asked of the others, which is please provide the feedback. I would say probably after this meeting, and we'll make sure that it's fed in and then shared back out in order to be consistent with how we're treating it for others.
Okay.
All right. Oh, do we have another question? Oh, no, that was the. Okay, point. All right, so we'll move on to the possible answers. And like Roy's example earlier, this is really a spectrum. We'll probably end up somewhere in the middle. Some of these options are unlikely to be pursued. So again, we're just interested in sort of which way people are floating around. So the first option is option A, or greater focus on equity programs. So under this option, PCE would invest more of its ratepayer funded revenues into programs to serve equity while taking every step possible to achieve our decarbonization goals. Now, this option would include us still seeking funding from the state. All of these options still include seeking state funding for low-income customers. So I just want to make that clear. And the last part of option A was an example would be seeking to spend about 3/4 of the program's budget on programs serving equity customers, however we would want to define them. Option B is a parallel focus, and PCE would invest its generation ratepayer funded revenues into programs that achieve the greatest level of decarbonization and will meet established goals for serving equity customers. For example, maybe spending half of the program's budget serving equity customers. Option C would be a greater focus on decarbonization programs, which would be PCE would invest its revenues into programs based primarily on achieving the deepest, most immediate levels of decarbonization. And we would meet our equity goals through other areas such as bill assistance, rate reductions, etc. So equity customers would still be eligible and served under programs like our state funded programs and our other programs, but there would not be an explicit carve out. So those are the 3 options we're giving to float around. And I think it's important to go to the discussion questions, Lester, because the first discussion question is, which equity customer segments should we be prioritizing when we're serving our ratepayer funds? Because like we were talking about, there's no statewide definition for underserved. There's no statewide definition for impacted by the fossil fuel economy, but there are statewide definitions for DAC and low income, and that's where the state money is going. So which customer segments do we want to spend our time and resources and funds on? The second,
Let's land on this question for a
Okay.
moment. So I think I put up this slide that really has those 4 types of equity customers. And we're, as Shalini said, the question is, we're curious, like, which of these equity customers are you interested in making sure you're investing in? And again, we're not holding you to this, you're not making a decision. We're looking for questions you have about this or just your general approach to this.
yep.
I have a question. How are the care customers determined?
They are, they have income qualifications, so care customers have to make within 200% of the federal poverty level, and FARA customers have to make within 250% of the federal poverty level. That doesn't exactly map to AMI, 80% AMI in San Mateo County.
It's a lot lower.
It's a lot lower.
Yeah. Okay.
You miss. Yeah. Yeah, you end up missing the people that are between federal poverty level and below 80% or 80% AMI.
Sort of just another framework that we talked about a little bit offline for this meeting is this notion. So there's sort of like a invest in your equity customers. What do you do? How much money do you put in? Who do you find it? But there's also, to me, like a little bit of an overlaying kind of do no harm focus. So no matter how we sort of define these people, and I take it back to the like decarbonizing their homes. And, if you look at right now, North Carolina and the hurricane situation, what's going on there is every single person who completely decarbonized their home with all electric has not had any resiliency or backup built into the system. So they are without electricity, no heat, no water cleaning, no food cooking, nothing. Whereas people who still had gas are able to function, they can boil water, they can potentially, so I always take that example when we think we're doing a really good job for people, like, here, we've decarbonized your house, isn't this great? And then you have a power shut off for a week. Well, if my house is completely decarbonized, I can like go to my sister's house, or I can go to my gym and take a shower, or go to a restaurant or order out because I can afford it. But if you don't have family or anyone around you, and you have no alternatives, no gym to go to, you can't afford restaurant delivery, you can't even get it into you. We've just kind of thought we were helping people, but now we've really created a vulnerability. And that's, to me, the do no harm kind of over thing, which is the context as, sort of white predominantly people making decisions for other people. So I'm really sensitive to making sure we put into these communities what they want, and that we think about how we add in resiliency so that things we think are good are not unintentionally going to harm them, because they wouldn't have harmed us and we didn't think about it. So that's just a commentary about the sort of framework overlay on thinking about this, the do no harm mantra.
So thank you.
Yeah.
So the question is, with these different categories of equity customers, do you have thoughts about who you serve more? And I think right now it's fair to say almost all of your focus now is on low income. So there are some other types of equity customers that right now are you're not doing as much with.
Well, low income are the easiest to define.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And low income defined as 80% of your.
Yeah, right. Low income is defined the way it's defined.
I want to apologize. I'm going to make a reversal of the statement I just made, because I realized that Kirsten, for example, and a couple of others in the room who are on our staff want to provide comment as subject matter experts, not necessarily as members of the public. And so I needed a second to think about that. So I want to reverse what I said, which is Kirsten and others, if you want to provide information to add to the discussion, please do. It's a different thing than providing
So while we're all thinking about it, let's have Kristen.
Kristen, are you still on? Can you hear that? Uh-oh.
There she is.
There she is.
Thank you.
Kristen, are you?
Thank you. Go ahead, Kirsten, you have the floor.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for providing all that content. And I want to add a little bit of additional perspective that the examples provided are focusing on our program serving building electrification and homeowners. And I completely agree with Raphael. It's more expensive to serve low-income homeowners than other homeowners. But also broadening the perspective to our transportation programs. A lot of the ways that we serve renters are through our transportation programs. And so, for example, with our used EV subsidy, our EV Ready program or e-bikes program, those are the main ways that renters can access our programs. And the level of subsidy that we give to those those customers on average, I believe, is often less than the average of subsidy that we give to homeowners.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Yes, Director McKinney.
Something came up in a CAC meeting, so I'm just gonna bring it up anyway. Someone called in, was talking about community solar, because renters are often not served by a lot of our programs. And landlords often, if they take advantage of the programs, they raise rents. And so they're cut out of the picture, but community solar, if you take the cost savings and then you're able to pass that on to a lot of equity customers, we don't have to electrify the apartment building, we don't have to electrify a house, and yet we're serving them directly in a way that's meaningful. And I thought that was a great idea.
Thank you. And I was remiss in saying we are using state funding for what's called the DAC Green Tariff Program. We have a facility being built near Los Banos, and we have some customers in Los Banos receiving 20% discounts on their bills through the commissions program.
Plus, if it has battery, it's providing the resilience that you talked about.
So I think tying back into our conversation we just had about I'm just trying to give some prompts so people can think, and I see that you've got a ton of comment. You know, we just heard affordability, greenhouse gas, these all kind of have a thread drawn through them. So maybe everyone's thinking a little bit about, you know, just in general, the affordability question, and we already sort of established it creeps into middle income people and working class people in our county as well. So just looking at this whole spectrum, Tom.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think the original question there, maybe said, do you want to assign a hierarchy to these different groups? And I think that's just fraught with some problems. And I can't think of anything in our foundational documents that would give us any guidance for that. So my inclination would be to steer clear of that. My question would be, which course of action provides the best environmental return on our investment? That's our charge, is environmental stuff. So not the best financial return on our investment, but which course of action achieves the greatest environmental benefit? I think that should be the question.
So go ahead.
Director.
I was gonna say, you can go ahead and talk about if there's like a class and not necessarily a hierarchy, but you know, there are people you're not paying as much attention to that you want to, beyond the way the director just said. But I will just go ahead and raise kind of then the next question, which is, in case you want to get into this as best as you can, you know, but how would you balance, how would you like to see your programs balanced? And again, these are three options just put there to stimulate your conversation. You don't necessarily need to adopt one of these ultimately. They can be designed, but then, you know, how would you approach this kind of a question about where you should be investing your program investments? So, and there was a hand up.
Okay, yes.
I think Betsy had.
Yeah.
Betsy,
she had her.
Betsy,
Yeah. So I think, first of all, Donna, what you said, don't do any harm, is absolutely important. And I think batteries, perhaps solar and batteries are a big part of that. I actually have a strong sense of injustice if we do not include some of these groups, the lower income and all, in the electrification, because I think there's so many benefits. We can keep the power on and not have that other piece. Right now with the heat, when we get the cold, it is so nice to have a heat pump.
Yeah.
I had a heat, we just electrified during the heat wave, air conditioning. It was a miracle. But if we don't, like you were saying, I could have gone, just somewhere else. Other people can't. And a lot of our, well, certainly in Bellhaven, which is our underserved community, it's a heat island. There's so many fewer trees. It is right next to East Palo Alto, which has the same issue. And people need the benefits of the electrification, but we have to be very, very cognizant of being able to not get them into a situation where they completely lose power.
Perfect. I think that's a great observation, Tiger.
I'll actually,
Defer for a moment.
yeah.
Great. So I have, did you?
Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure I understood the qualifications for Karen Farah. It's 2.5, they're 2.5 times the federal poverty rate, correct? Right, so roughly for a family of 4, maybe it's $80,000, right? And the 80% AMI is about $150,000 in this county, right? There's a huge delta there, right? So, I mean, to the extent that Karen Farah folks, that is people who are in that, band of it's about 75,000 for a family of 4, can receive some significant benefits from Karen Farah, right? I mean, I don't know what the discount is, but it's in the high teens, if not the 20s.
Care and
30%.
And then it's 17 and a half for Farah.
Yeah, okay.
Justin?
We might be able to say that sector is somehow, being served through what is a state mandated program, correct? So does it make any sense to think about, waiting in, and I somewhat disagree with Tom. I mean, I think equity is about lifting up those folks so they can look over the fence, because all their life, right, they've been on a shorter stool, right? So we have to raise the stool, right? So that people can actually be at that same level. So, but, would it make sense to look at that 70,000, 75,000 to 150,000 level, which, you would have asked me, somebody making $150,000 10 years ago, I'd say, that person is making bank, right? I'm not sure that you're making bank in the county of San Mateo if you're a family of 4, struggling to pay a $3,000, $4,000 rent, right? So I don't know, does it make sense to stratify it a bit?
That's interesting.
Yet, perhaps have some programs for the Care Farah folks, but, look at, because they are receiving some benefit. And then maybe look at that other band, the 80% AMI band.
I think Director House.
Thank you. So as Tom pointed out, one of our foundational goals is environmental impact. And I would argue that one of our foundational strategies is not mass electrification so much as market transformation. And so my general thought is, I do think we should be focused more, I mean, maybe not entirely, but I think if we're going to lean one direction, it should be towards our equity customers. Because even if we spend more money per customer on lower income customers and electrify fewer homes, we are still achieving the strategic goal of market transformation. That is, we are still building up a base of installers and contractors who will electrify more homes. And so, I guess I feel like there's a value to focusing our resources on customers who might not be able to do this on their own at the expense of customers who I believe under the right circumstances with a transformed market and more installers would do this on their own. So I guess, you know, in terms of achieving our big goal, which is to get more homes electrified and reduce our environmental impact, reaching out to equity, you know, to lower income customers and our disadvantaged customers, even if it reduces our footprint a little bit, still achieves our goal. So I'd say when in doubt, lean towards the, you know, servicing our lean towards our equity programs at the expense of our sort of mass market programs.
Yes, Director Reagan.
So one of the things I'm hearing, and others know way more about it than I do, is this idea that San Mateo County doesn't as easily get federal and state and other funds because of how relatively high compared to other part of the country people's salaries are. And so it's harder for us to have that low hanging fruit because our people make more even though they're underserved. And I'm wondering if strategically investing in a grant writer that, you know, kind of like a lobbyist / grant writer, they're expensive, they're really hard to find. Good ones are impossible to find.
We have that in the other. That's her job.
Okay, great.
But I'm not you, so.
2 or 3 of you to, because it's really easy in the Central Valley to qualify for tons of federal dollars. It's not, the need is as great in some parts of our county as the Central Valley, but the feds and the state don't see it that way. So maybe we need to invest more in lobbyists and grant writers. And also in fundraising, you make you do a better job if you partner, you know this, if you partner with others, then your need looks bigger. So that kind of strategic, I don't know how you can do that because that's not our mission. Our mission is San Mateo County. But just strategically, lobbying, grant writing, more of it to overcome our high income deficit.
So one thing that the added funds from third-party sources is extremely helpful. But relative to the need is still very small. And so one of the things we're looking at from a scalability standpoint, well, let me take a half step back. For a manufacturer to care about a market segment, they need hundreds of thousands of units. And so the question of scale becomes both one of installing enough volume that the manufacturers produce more and lower the costs of heat pumps, as one example. And then on the other side, we ultimately need to engage private capital at scale, or the basically Wall Street capital scale. We're starting to explore that in the GovPD program, which is the most bankable. But ultimately, to deliver scale on the order of something that can not only move our service territory, but actually be a model for statewide work, we have to find ways to do that across all of our work. And those are the key, you know, what we're seeing right now is the key strategic challenges for the next, 3 years to deliver that sort of scale.
Yes, Director McHugh.
So I have lived other places where if the power went out, you could die. And people did die. It was easy. That's not true here. We had a 24-hour PG&E outage at my house 2 weeks ago, and it was inconvenient. Even my 102-year-old mom was fine. She was better than I was because she grew up on a farm with no electricity. She knew exactly what to do. Of the options presented here, I think option C is the most consistent option relative to our basic mission. I think there's merit in all of these, but our basic mission is one of environmental electricity. So if you're asking which strategy to pursue, I would emphasize option C.
Thanks. Certainly, as I'm looking at the options, I just naturally gravitate toward probably B because I'm looking for balance, and that's the way I'm oriented. But I'm really trying to. My brain works best when it has a metaphor in front of it, and when it comes to high level processing, I like to be able to at least see something on the ground. And so because I'm wrestling with that in my head, some of the things that have come up, there are issues that I've thumped on a little bit in the past. But to Donna's point earlier, well, you're not wrong. We have good electrification now everywhere, except for certain areas on the coast. There's a certain chunk of, I think, Menlo Park. And because I have that coast orientation, you know, a couple of years ago, power went out for like 3 weeks. That's harder than 24 hours. So thinking in terms of, well, where's an area where that swath could do with having the grid strengthened and in such a way that's resilient toward a storm like that? I advocate for not electrifying that area right now, because when their power goes off, that's 3 weeks, they're out of anything. And so at least maybe they have gas to, you know, cook food. And so as we're thinking in terms of electrifying a swath, how can we back them up in such a way that they're not going to falter when there is a power outage? Also, when it comes to renters, Raphael knows well that I'm on this personal mission to try and figure out as a renter, a way to get the landlord to enable me to start electrifying the house, which I would hope would begin with a heat pump water heater and nothing more. I want to talk to you at the end of the night, by the way. But that, and I think some of this kind of dovetails into where question 3 starts popping up in a moment. But I feel like if we had a way to enable renters, and I don't know if that's a incentive program top down from the landlords to have a reason to electrify their homes in such a fashion that they wouldn't want to raise rates because they don't need to, because the cost savings are there. Which sounds counterintuitive if we're trying to go the equity route, but that's a consideration for how to help folks who need the extra help when they're in a situation where they do not have control over their living circumstance.
Right.
You pay your own electric bill.
Right. And so I just wanted to add that into the mix.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. You know, when I hear this, it's, you know, I kind of agree with everybody. I mean, that's kind of the problem, you know, do no harm, equity as our core value, spark market transformation, that was interesting, and maximize environmental impact. As I try to balance that, and one of the things I'm sure we're all struggling with is there's really no math or analysis behind this. We're all just, you know, what's our gut reaction? Kind of a challenge, but I'm kind of find myself between like wanting a hybrid of B and C, where perhaps B is correct. We should be spending about half of our program dollars on equity, but maybe running it through these relatively inefficient, you know, electrification projects isn't the way to do that. So maybe 50% is the right answer, but maybe rate and bill assistance is the right solution for equity. And so I think I'm looking for that hybrid component.
There's a question about that, but I don't think we've served that.
Right. The
Yes.
third
I mean, would it be good
Yes.
to kind of like maybe put all the questions?
Yes.
Let me hear from, let me just hear from.
And then,
We have.
and-
Director Fong, please, and then Director Wright.
and while
And
they're
then-
responding, you'll see there is a third question here which gets at that. So feel free to respond to that also.
Yeah, thank you. So, so I'm looking at slide 24. We're investing 25% on average $8 million a year. Rate paying fund a budget serving low-income customers, and then we expect to secure another $9 million more of additional public funding. So that's 17. I mean, we're increasing the whole year, first of all. Second, to the next slide, we're looking at to the extent to which PCUs should serve all customers, regardless of wealth segment, with accessible programs to maximize impact and decarbonization. So that's sort of a strategic goal in there. It's already been identified. So, and as we look at certainly DEA and I, and then we talk a lot about the disadvantaged communities, how we serve the equity customers, which is still certainly important. But we also have to look at sort of context in the sense that in this county, roughly about 44.8% of the population don't speak English. So they proportion that discussion.
Hey, Anders, the motorcycle drowned you out, 44%, and then the motorcycle done. Sorry.
He agrees.
Settled.
He agreed that he needs it.
Speaking.
Speaking, yeah.
At home.
So, at home, and then, 36% born and born. 25% of the population are Latinos, Latinx community, and about 30% of them are Asian. So I think there's gotta be something for everybody in terms of a balanced approach. For example, option B, where a portion of that dedicated to serve equity customers, and a portion of that can also be dedicated to serve the underserved customers who suffer from language barriers. To the extent that we want to serve the goal of decarbonizing, some of these homes are owned by Indies, those who don't necessarily speak English at home. Some sort of a program to reach those customers and create a bigger impact. I think that especially when we're in a time where we're somewhat of a bigger pool, could benefit us.
So I think at the moment, I like option B at the moment. And I think where we are at right now, which is not quite the example shown in option B, but rather the 25%, in my gut sounds pretty good. I think it's important to do a bit of both, and I think it's, but I guess my sort of, at the moment, my threshold is, if we knew what percent would allow PCE the opportunity to make a big play, to, you know, to maybe Director Alf's note about market transformation, I guess that would be, like, I think it would be unfortunate if we were to pick a percentage of our program money going to equity customers that was at the loss of the opportunity to do something like our concierge program. To me, I think the concierge program is a game-changing, potentially really important program. I think I would agree with Director Alfs more if I felt confident, for example, that, you know, even if we focused on equity customers more, the rest of the county would electrify at a reasonable pace without help in the form of a concierge program. But we are in early days, and we are at like maybe 1% adoption right now. And I think the whole idea behind the concierge program is that we don't think it's going to happen unless PCE can take a lead position as the county, helping these smaller cities get there and the residents who live there. So I feel like that's my threshold is I want to do both. I want to support equity customers, but not if doing so loses a tangible opportunity to make a big play for everyone.
And we're gonna, I just wanna step in, we're gonna have to wrap up this part of the conversation.
Okay. Really quick. What percentage of residents in the county are renters? That's a really.
It's a pretty big.
Could be a big consideration.
It's around 40%.
Yeah, because they're not gonna take advantage of a lot of electrification.
Well, our, as Kirsten noted, our transportation programs are geared towards lower end renter, including renters. And then on the building side, where it's equipment in the building, right, where it's the property owner making that decision. You know, we can ask renters to ask their property owner, right? And that's about the extent of that. And of course, Director Big Stick, you know, has gone that route. It's not easy, even if you have an amenable property owner.
The other place we really helped on renters in, like, so Burlingame has got 6,400 units of renters on 6,000 single family homes. And we have 3,500 units under construction. All 3,500 units pretty much are electrified. So our reach codes have really helped in this, you know, as the San Mateo County meets its RENA goals and RENA numbers. The older housing stock is where it's tough, you know, and maybe the single family home rentals. But the good news is the reach codes were a very small investment and got huge amount leverage.
I'm bringing this up because I'm in a city with a lot of older homes. And
Yeah.
I know a lot of residents who are renters who don't use heat in the middle of the winter. Now think about that.
Yeah.
Because it's so expensive. And they've got old furnaces or wall heaters and they say, I can't afford it.
Yeah, and when those go, Batman's not gonna let you put something else in.
Exactly.
Yeah, but to your point, the leverage and helping will be. That's great.
Just very briefly, I thought that what Director Lorraine said is right. I'm very comfortable with what we've got. I think it would be a mistake to increase the percentage from 25% to 50% if it means it's gonna adversely impact our concierge program, because that's new for us, as is our in-house call center. And I think those are going to be really important in moving this ball. And this isn't an easy ball to move. I don't care where you are in terms of the percentage of wealth. The homes aren't electrifying in general. So we need to help them. And the concierge program is created because that's what people need. And it's true, they absolutely need contractors to do the work. But to the extent that we're able to motivate people, whether they're paying for it themselves or we're paying part of it, it's gonna build that contractor base, which we all need. So I'm very comfortable with what we've got right now.
All right, we've got 1, 2, 3, then we'll. So go ahead, Leslie.
Just a question on the concierge program. I thought it was funded, the idea it's completely paid for by the homeowner for the concierge program.
That's one option. There's 3 options within the program based on what their preference is and also well.
But there's an administrative cost to set it up and
Right,
manage it.
right, but
Yes, please.
Are you complete?
Yeah.
Clarifying comment is, we talked a little bit about this internally, that we don't want necessarily for the board to get too hung up on the percentages. It's really getting a sense of, are we good where we are? Do we need to increase it to some level? Do we need to increase it a lot? But we're not asking you to say, yes, you know, 50, 70. It's really getting a sense of that balance and where you want it to move the needle or not. Is that fair?
Yeah. Director Nash?
I have very little to add what's been just said. I wanted to highlight the concierge program and also the emergency water heater replacement program. I think are going to be game changers. Yeah. I talk to people who want to electrify and they just don't know which way to turn, and I don't think they have the same financial needs. They just don't know how to do it. So I think it's really going to help.
So I think where we're at right now is pretty good. We just have, I can make sure I pronounce her name right, Yana? Right, with that investment alone, we got $8-9 million of additional funding. So as we go forward with that, if we can pursue more of those programs, it's likely going to achieve even more. I'm just speculating because she's only been here for like 4 months.
6 months, but
6
yes.
months, all right. That we continue moving on, and things are going to change. Every year, it's going to be a little bit more different, but keeping our concierge program is definitely what we need to do, and having that ability to provide our customers with the confidence that when they call, it's going to be clear, and they're going to feel like they're not going to get ripped off. Right? I think that's the biggest fear when you're dealing with contractors. It's like, they're going to overcharge me, and how am I going to deal with that? Forget it. I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm doing. So that's what I would say, and we'll get there.
Public comment now, if there's any. Great. Great, we'll go ahead and close public comment, and we'll move on to question 3.
Thank you. So I'm gonna take us through question 3, which I know it's getting late, so a last motivation. So just to remind everybody what question 3 is all about, it is asking, are there any new or modified lines of business that PCE should engage in to further support decarbonization and electrification in California? So we want to take a moment while we're working on the strategic plan to really think about, okay, what is the market doing right now? What have we as PCE been doing? And are there any new opportunities out there where we want to think a little bit outside of the box? So in the first questions 1 and 2, it was more about the options presented to you and where do we find ourselves in balancing different priorities. Question 3 is a little bit different. We want to talk about, let's be creative. Let's think about what we could do to really push our mission forwards, which is decarbonization and doing it in an affordable manner. And I think to set a little bit more of a context, for me, there's like 2 big areas and 2 big trends that impact our kind of mission and where we want to go in the future. So once, as we've been discussing, we're focusing heavily on electrification in homes and decarbonization of homes. But to really enable that future of decarbonization on the grid, we need to make sure that the grid can handle that decarbonization. The transmission and distribution grid has been struggling over the last few years. And, you know, what is PCE's role in making sure that the T&D grid can actually keep up with the change that we are, you know, causing by working with homeowners, by working with our procurement team to make the grid greener. At the same time, we're really supporting, you know, the deployment of more kind of customer-oriented energy solutions, which we call distributed energy resources, or DERs. If we're eventually getting to scale where that really, you know, has a large impact, how does that impact our business model? What is our impact? What is our business model for DERs? And if they really grow to a scale, which I personally don't believe may happen in the next 5 years, but let's think big, you know? If you're really successful in installing more DERs at a customer site, how does that impact our business model? And then the last concept I just want to throw out there is, you know, right now, PCE is really good at 2 core things. We do procurement of large centralized systems, you know, that are usually far away from load pockets. They're in the valley, for example. We transport that electricity into our service area with large transmission lines. So we're doing, our power resources team does a great job of procuring large centralized systems. And our programs team does a great job of working with customers for identifying behind the meter solutions, customer demand side solutions. But there's this middle that has come up repeatedly, which is there's community solar, there's community microgrids. There's a little bit what some folks call the missing middle. That's kind of the systems that are between 1 to 5 megawatts in size. They're connected to the distribution grid, but they're really hard to develop. So is that maybe an area that PCE should think about? So these are the questions and the new lines of business we're going to discuss. But before we do that, I just wanted to talk quickly, just like everybody else has done, to discuss some definitions, so we're all on the same page when we're talking about some of the more technical terms. You know, electrical service, we provide electrical service, that's provision of electricity to end users, that's PCE's core business. We are not in the business of providing delivery service, which is the 4th bullet down. That's a umbrella term for both the transmission and the distribution services, which are provided by PG&E. The transmission system is the bulk movement of electrical energy from a large generating site, such as a power plant, to the electrical substation. So think, you know, the transmission system, big lines, usually carrying electricity over long distances from, let's say, the San Joaquin Valley into the load pockets along the coast. And then at the substation, the electricity turns down to the distribution system, which are the low voltage wiring that brings the electricity from the substation to the home. There's few more concepts. So front of the meter systems, when we talk about front of the meter systems, we talk about the electricity produced on the utility side of the meter. And those are systems that are interconnected to the transmission and distribution grid, the work that Roy and team does. Behind the meter systems are systems that produce electricity on the customer side of the meter. So that's the typical solar plus storage for customers that Rafael team works on. And then just to kind of align on the definition of distributed energy resources, DERs are assets on the distribution grid. They can be connected behind the meter or front of the meter. So a behind the meter DER is the typical, solar plus storage at the customer side. But then there's also those community solar and community microgrids that are like 1 to 5 megawatts, smaller than what Roy typically deals with. And they are connected to the distribution grid directly and then give electrons out, generate electricity for many customers via the distribution grid. So I'm going to stop right here and just ask if anyone has questions about those definitions before we're diving into more of the potential lines of businesses that staff and the ad hoc committee and community stakeholders have already brainstormed about. So we have a few things we want to discuss with you there, but before I go there, just asking if anyone has questions on this.
Yes. Do DERs require their own dedicated distribution system if they are behind the meter?
No, typically not. They can require upgrades to the existing distribution system. So that's a PG&E decision. For example, we've been talking about this a lot and Rafael can provide more context, but usually, if you have, let's say, it depends on how big your panel is. If you have a panel that's 100 amps right now and you're installing any measure behind the meter that fits within those 100 amps of your panel, the distribution grid doesn't care. If you need to upgrade your panel and need more capacity from the distribution grid by doing so, then PG&E cares and it gets much more expensive and much more complicated.
Thank you.
Right. So here we kind of identified in previous conversation 5 potential new lines of business or modified lines of business. And I'm going to start talking through them. Maybe I'll talk through all of them first and then we can have a discussion, even though you can also interrupt me if something urgent comes up.
Can I bring something really?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think everybody knows this, but I just want to be really clear that there's no way we can do all of this.
Yes.
Just be the damn spirit. And I also, the other question will be on the back end of this. It's a 5-year horizon, so think about that. And what would we not do? So this is a couple things to put in the box.
So the specific question you're gonna be asked is which opportunities are most relevant or most important to consider over the next 5 years? And that is, I just want to reiterate what Sean said, the implication being you can do one of these things or 2 of these things. Like don't tell staff to do all of these things.
So it occurred to me as I was reading through this that it feels like some of these things were already kind of heading in the direction of
yes.
concierge service being clear. So is it kind of highlighted where we're already starting to dip our feet in versus where we have not begun dipping our feet in, or is there a toe in everything at this point?
Yeah, I'm going to walk
we
through
can
this
call
and I
that
can
out.
call that out. Yeah, yeah. That's a really good point because for a lot of these things, we started to dip our toes in it, I would say. And the question is a little bit, how big do we go? Yeah, so that's why we're calling it a modified line of business because we're already doing it. How much should we pursue it versus like completely new lines of business? So the first point is energy and decarbonization, consulting and technical assistance. We've already heard in the last conversation that I think, we heard the feedback concierge services are essential. These kinds of services come in kind of different flavors, I want to say. You know, the consulting services are typically for business and local government entities that have environmental, social, and governance goals. We already have our REACH codes program that works with a lot of local government. So we already, that's an example of where we already provide a lot of service to local governments, but we could grow and expand that. And we could especially expand that to businesses. The concierge services, you know, is kind of the second point, personalized energy services for commercial and residential customers. It's really about, I may even have the funds, but I just don't know where to start. Like, how can you help me to start the process of becoming better, better with my energy? That's also something that we're already doing. Like, how much do we want to grow that? What we're doing implicitly, but not explicitly, is that we're providing consulting to help other communities design and implement community choice aggregation programs or replicate some of the programs that we do, that we've been successful with. We're kind of already talking to our CCA peers and saying, you know, this is a program that's worked for us and this has not worked for us. So we're doing that a lot, but that could be more formalized, you know, or you could provide more, that kind of, the idea of us like functioning as a testing bed and then bringing that statewide to others through our CCA community. And there's also been the idea that we could just become a PC university, not a full university, of course, but like do more educational programs, you know, to the community, to stakeholders, to anyone who would want to learn more. This is not something we're doing yet, so just getting that out there. The second point, you know, I teed that up in the context a little bit, but we could be working a little bit more on fostering our distributed energy resources. Like I said, we're doing that already a lot via programs for customer-sided distributed energy resources, or what we call behind the meter energy resources. But we're really starting now, Peter and I are working really intensely on supporting the concept of virtual power plants. It's been a buzzword over the last few years, but the idea is really that we support more installations of behind the meter resources that can reduce load between 4 to 9 p.m. during the times when we have peak times when there's a lot of demand on our energy grid. And if we aggregate all those resources together, these smaller behind the meter resources, we can create a virtual power plant and really use all those systems together to make an impact on our procurement decisions potentially once we get to scale. That's something we're doing already. We just came out with an RFP for those VPP services. And so we're really excited to get that going. And then there's this kind of missing middle that we already discussed. You know, it's the second point there, community solar and storage and community scale microgrids. It's those 1 to 5 megawatt projects, you know, that can support community resilience, especially in areas that have a lot of outages, maybe, you know, along the coast. It's an area that's very hard to serve because it's very expensive. But, you know, there's public funding out there, you know, we could do some, you know, if we really wanted to put our mind to it, maybe we should investigate that. That's number 2. And I know this is just, it's quite a bit, but number 3, also what I provided in the context, you know, that there's a lot of challenges right now with our transmission and distribution grid not keeping up with our decarbonization that we're doing on the, you know, on the generation side. So there's a lot of opportunities for increased advocacy by PCE to engage in kind of the policy discussions on improving the transmission and distribution grid. There's conversations going on at the CAISO, there's conversations going on at the CPUC in various proceedings. So, you know, we could focus more. We're already engaging, another area where we're already engaging, but we could do more, like put more resources to that to really make sure our T&D grid is set up in the way we need it. The next one is a really interesting one, also something we're doing a lot that Rafael is starting to do. Actually, Rafael just mentioned, you know, we want to do more with incentives. We want to run our programs, but as Rafael said, it's always going to reach only a small portion of our goal because our goals for the state of California are so large. We can't possibly have that many incentives to reach our goals. So financing and providing financial services to customers that are willing to do electrification and decarbonization with maybe financing and not full incentives is a big focus. We've already started offering, what's called power purchase agreements, but for smaller behind the meter solar and storage systems, especially under our GovPV program. We could build that out and offer that to more customers. We're starting to dabble into like lease to own models under our new battery savings program, where we're basically working with a vendor that helps customers who cannot pay for battery and solar upfront, that they lease the system first and then with the eventual goal to own. And that helps actually folks with low income that don't have a high tax burden to take advantage of tax credits that are provided under ITC. So it's kind of a nifty way to take advantage of tax credits with then customers still eventually owning systems. We could do more work with EV charging infrastructure, owning or operating that, and then controlling the rates that are charged via those charging stations. And we could do on-bill financing with maybe varying rates to customers who, who equity customers have lower rates, non-equity customers potentially higher rates. Again, also something we're already offering a 0% loan for some of the remediation costs for under our turnkey program. The very last thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to open it up, this is something that actually came out of community feedback sessions, is that there's been a big push in California recently on the so-called neighborhood decarbonization zones, where the idea is that you take a whole neighborhood, electrify the entire neighborhood, and then literally remove the gas lines in that neighborhood. It's something that PG&E has been really trying to do in certain areas where it's really challenging for them to bring gas service to customers. It has also been very challenging for customers to accept that and engage in that. There is a great electrification vision behind that, but as we've already heard, resiliency is a huge issue. So we certainly not do that in areas where there's a high outage risk. But there was a discussion in the community level of like, if this were kind of the utopian future, if we could create that model and show that it works, decarbonizing a whole neighborhood and showing maybe with solar and storage how it could become completely green, could we then make that a replicable model to others in the state? So that was a lot. I'm going to move on to the questions. So do you have any questions about these ideas that have come out of previous conversations? And then, like Lester said, I think the most important feedback we'd like to hear from you is like, which of these opportunities seem most relevant to you? Which ones are maybe less of important to you? Are there anything else that you think we should be considering that we haven't talked about?
Can I ask a clarifying question? So when you talk about lines of business, the lines of business aren't necessarily associated with a profit center, that is, right?
We don't need to make income from all of these things. No, correct. Yes. Yeah.
But some do have revenue.
But some do have revenue.
Cost reduction.
Yeah.
Correct, right. But when I look at this, it's like, not sure the advocacy is gonna make us a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, in the short run.
Areas of work or additional work, if that helps.
Yeah, maybe not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Warbeck.
I really think the future of energy is with the DER program. I think it's extremely important. I would like to invest any resources we can in the not too distant future. It has impacts in many different areas. If we really have DERs, the need to upgrade the grid is vastly reduced. So that's one aspect that is gets a freebie. It will increase resiliency. It's just clear to me that that's the direction we should head in for future energy production. So I would highly advocate for option 2.
Thank you. Yes, Colleen, Dr. Mackey.
I would agree with what Harvey said. in our city, we have a lot of hills and got probably half the city can't get solar. It doesn't work. They don't have enough sunshine. I think also the resiliency is really important. I would investigate city-owned property. We have a lot of lots that aren't big enough to actually put housing on or anything substantial, but you start combining those kinds of assets into microgrids, you've got something to work with. And it's kind of also that it's cementing the whole marketing idea. This is community owned. This is our microgrid. We're hardening our own community and making it more resilient. I think that's a really positive direction.
Yes, Director Lorraine.
Thank you. Both comments resonate with me, and I was gonna try to see maybe what distinguishes them. Because, for example, I feel like I don't know enough about community solar right now. And it sounds interesting and potentially important, but how might that contrast with what Director Rarbach was just saying about DERs?
Yeah, it's a good question. So just, actually, let me go back to this slide. Yeah, I don't have it. It's not as detailed as it is in the printout, but so just to describe the quick difference between community solar and storage and microgrids. Community solar and storage is typically like our DAC Green Tariff program. Folks are familiar with that, but it is a solar plus storage program that's connected to the grid directly and then feed electrons into the grid that then serve a few thousand customers. It doesn't have islanding function. And what makes a solar plus storage project that's connected to the distribution grid a microgrid is if it has islanding function. So if you have community solar and storage, if the grid goes down, that community solar and storage project does not deliver any electrons to anyone. But if you develop a community microgrid, that microgrid would have islanding function and would be able to serve the customers within its boundaries, even during grid outage situations. That's like the one, that's both projects that are connected to the distribution grid that are like 1 to 5 megawatts in scale, more or less. Then we have the virtual power plants, which is a behind the meter solution. So the first ones were front of the meter solutions connected to the grid. Now the virtual power plants we're talking about behind the meter solar plus storage. Generally, the ones that are being installed now, in like 10 years ago and 5 years ago is different, but generally the ones that are installed now, they have islanding function. So if the grid goes down, they will keep your home energized, but not anyone around you. Does that help it a little bit? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think I would agree with, so yeah, I guess from that, it seems like, I think Director Rarbach's comments are important. I'm hopeful that we can have more people exploring solar and storage solutions, and that as we, as Peninsula Clean Energy helps with that, we can potentially include a virtual power plant functionality such that they are, I guess that would allow for multiple benefits. You have the islanding, the single islanding, you're resilient, and then you're also helping with overall load issues more regionally. I was just gonna note that I think, we've been talking throughout the night about resiliency and the importance of doing no harm and helping people, and I think building electrification, like GovBE, well, no, not GovBE. I guess I'm thinking more like GovPV, but with storage, could help with that as well, in maybe a way similar to what Director Mackin was mentioning. As an example, if our rec centers became emergency resiliency centers that stayed on after a power shut off, and people may not be able to go to the gym if their power is out, but maybe they could go to the rec center. I'll just share that. I think that's important too.
So when I was going through this list, I found it all very interesting, and I put no next to almost all of it. Except everything under the diversifying PCE's energy supply. I put yes with a big exclamation point. I think both in front of and behind the meter. And I think we can get RA value for some of this, and we should. I think it's really important for us to take this whole RA issue seriously, because economically it's killing us. And it's all about decentralization in the future.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of people investigating it and talking about it. How much has been done with it, I think, is not anywhere near as much as how much it's been talked about. And I'll give a shout out to Raphael, because he's included from the very beginning in his analysis of DER, demand response. And I think it's exactly right. We need to manage the demand of our customers in the context of doing this decentralization and diversification. And it's the right thing for us to do. And I think that if we're able to succeed both in the behind the meter virtual power plant and in front of the meter community solar, which I believe has been done more in some other states than in California, I think that other people will pick up on what we do, and that will be a better way to influence the CCA community than to formalize a CCA consulting practice, which I wouldn't do that, or PCE University, although education is important and our connection to our customers with that education is critical. But I'm telling you, if we succeed in putting in place a DER strategy that other people recognize, we're going to get incredible focus and credit for that.
Yes, Brandon, Jeff House, okay, yes, Director House.
Thank you. Am I up? Sorry.
You're good.
Okay. So looking at these 5 sort of modified lines of business, I see an organizing principle that I'll just suggest. We have one initiative that I think is actually mission critical to our future, and that is the DERs, particularly the virtual power plant. I see 2 initiatives that feed directly into that by providing basically nodes in the virtual power plant or the DER network, and that's the financial services and partnerships to basically which is going to proliferate more solar, more EV charging, which are nodes in a virtual power plant, and the neighborhood decarbonization zones, which would be a great opportunity to sort of build things that add into, or again, the VPP. And I see 2 other initiatives, the advocacy and the technical consulting and technical assistance, that are perhaps less mission critical, but also are probably less expensive because they're more information based than sort of physical or finance based. So I guess what I'd say is I feel like I think the DER strategy and the VPPs are kind of sort of central to all of this. You know, we add on we use the financial services, and we explore the decarbonization zones because they feed into the VPP. And alongside those things, we look at opportunities for advocacy and technical assistance with with my expectation that we could probably achieve certain things in those areas for relatively minor costs, whereas the VPP is probably going to be a heavy lift that should be kind of the central focus. So in a way, I'm saying, yes, we should do all of these, but I guess I'm saying that there's a priority here that trying to recognize what's going to cost more, but also what's sort of really central to our future operations versus what is a support to our future operations.
Great. Okay, yes. Oh, we have Director Mike Rob.
Yes, I'm with everybody with a DER. What I'm curious about is number 5, the neighborhood decarbonization zones. Like, what is the process of it? It sounds very like infrastructure heavy.
Yeah.
I just want to know, is it like very intensive type of infrastructure?
So I've had a conversation with PG&E about this a while ago, and they're actually looking desperately for people who want to work with them on this. PG&E would basically do the large majority of the heavy duty infrastructure work. They've identified certain zones where, again, it's very hard for them to serve them with gas service. They either don't have gas service that's functioning well, or, you know, it's starting to break and they need to replace it and they don't want to invest all that money. So they are looking for folks like us who are willing to go into the homes and do electrification of the homes with PG&E or without. So we would take care of the homeowner side of things, and PG&E would take care of the gas distribution side of things. They would remove the gas lines and all that. So that's definitely not something we're proposing to get
They would
into.
remove it, not cap it.
That's a good question. I think in some instances they would cap it, but the idea, I think, is eventual complete removal. So like the idea, not we could cap it now to then later use it again. The idea is to just nix it.
The biggest problem with something like that is those run right down the middle of my brand new. You know, so the practicality of that is.
Yeah, and I think they're talking mostly about areas that are not particularly developed. So I don't even know if these neighborhood decarbonizations on where they are in our service area. That's something we would have to look into.
Yeah.
Very.
Exploring with our CPC staff, a particular project that's been in the works. A small community in the Central Valley has been previously served by an independent gas utility that then went bankrupt. PG&E was then tasked with taking over that service. PG&E does not want to operate that service with the existing infrastructure for liability reasons. So they're sitting with this question of, do they overhaul all the gas infrastructure to serve this community, or they avoid those costs and put that into electrification as well? And in this case, the challenge is that to do this, it's a combination of easement requirements and basically having to get everyone in that community to get on board with electrifying. And so that would be kind of the natural fit for the CCA, is building the community buy-in, which is not easy. This particular example is a pretty small community, and it's been 2-3 years in the works, and they're not there yet. So.
It seems to me like what's interesting about that is, you know, like these small rural, you know, communities that would benefit from just getting rid of gas, or, you know, I mean, like there's a fire that goes through and you gotta rebuild, you don't rebuild the gas. But for us to take that on feels, in our dense urban community, like ripping out, I will tell you right now, it's never gonna happen in a city like Burlingame, unless you just say, as we tear up the roads, you know, we remove the. So I think capping it is fine, like for now.
Yeah.
It would be, fine. But it seems to me like if we're gonna focus our energy, that just seems very low on priorities for me. Yes.
As a small rural community, Half Moon Bay and the coast, we have passed an ordinance to cap all gas by 2045. That's
But that's
our ordinance.
not removing it necessarily.
Correct, but capping it.
Depressurized, capping it, I mean, you can leave it in place, but cap it
Right.
way back.
Yeah.
right? So it can live there, but it won't be leaking or anything.
Exactly. Yes, Dr. Nash.
I just want to, so I said, with all the EVs that are coming, are being purchased, and many more people, the bidirectional charging with EV.
Oh, bi-directional. Okay.
Yeah. So the vehicle to grid, vehicle to home.
We have one more little topic to get through, so yes, Director Romero, and then I'll open it up.
Yeah, I guess I missed the meeting where we had an RFP for VPP, which I still want to understand how they're gonna work. Right, I mean, because the technology is kind of there, but how we link them together and make them work, but it would be great to see it out. So I just have a comment on the financial services piece. And that is, would we want to think about, and where's Nick, because he's gonna pull his hair out. Would we want to think about potentially, entering the world of PACE, right? And actually using PACE, right, to increase, right, property assessed. So basically it's a charge on your tax bill. It would only be for homeowners, right? It's already being used in, commercially. I don't know if we qualify, and this is something that I think the attorney would have to say, because there's California enabling legislation that allowed PACE to happen. But to the extent that we can issue a fairly large bond, right? Pay $50, $70, $100 million worth of a bond, right? And immediately put it to work, whether it's on DER or whatever, right? Does that make sense? You know, again, you know, there's the kind of financial, whatever, presentation that kind of goes with it. But I wonder if that's something that maybe moves forward some of the scaling issue. So we become the pace entity.
Dr. Face.
Without belaboring it further, I wanted to echo what board member Alves had to say, which I took to be a crescendo of the pro DER sentiment that I heard, at least a consensus around. But past that, I wanted to also say I think that advocacy is a good idea to get number 3. I don't know what level, but I think any augmentation of advocacy will ultimately work in not just our favor, but the greater our favor. And I wanted to put a plug in for the concierge services. As a renter trying to navigate it, that I have to understand how it works to begin with, let alone find contractor A, the plumber, contractor B, the electrician, and try and figure out what the incentives look like and put it all together in a package. If I could call one number and that person helps me put that package together instead of me trying to figure out each piece, I think that would be invaluable toward people not feeling intimidated by the process. And that's worth its weight right there.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to quickly thank Director Nash for pointing out bidirectional charging as a possible something we could explore, I hope, and +1 that, and also just mention, I hope it fits within the broader discussion of BERs that we're having.
Yes, Dr. Coleman.
I'll just share very briefly. So actually, about a month ago, Senator Josh Becker and I toured a local South San Francisco startup called Span. I don't know, maybe you're familiar, but they're basically creating smart electrical panels. And they also mentioned that they're interested in reconnecting with PCE on their product. And the electrical panel upgrade, the smart panel is around $3,000. And so it's a lot cheaper than Span, SPAN. And I'll be sure to connect you.
Yeah. If I just open up on it, so we can dispense it. Being done, why the close for public comment? Do you all feel like we've given enough input here? Okay, so we're gonna move on to the future value proposition. And the wrap up, right?
Yeah, we have 2 things I know it's late at night, but there were 2 things I wanted to kind of introduce to the board so that when you see them in January, you're not surprised by them. But they're works in progress. And we're bringing them here more to show them to you, really, than soliciting deep response. So the first one here is value proposition. And so this is a strategic planning process. And to be clear, one of the drivers of strategy is about your value proposition. And as you heard Shalini describe it, what we look for in a process like this is that staff and you have guidance about what to do as the world is changing around you. You have guidance about the ongoing decisions you make. And one of the critical issues is value proposition. That is a key criteria that needs to drive what you do, but also you're in the market, like you're out there, you're a consumer provider. And so it's important for you to be clear about what your value proposition is as an organization. Your value proposition, as you know, we gather it talking with folks, it's really clear. Everybody says some version of that your value proposition has always been, you know, cleaner, and we're not using that term, but cleaner energy, and cheaper energy. Like you've been able to deliver on both of those for a number of reasons. Some of the reasons kind of being luck, I think, as I understand the story. But that is changing because there's a mandate that's kind of leveling that. Your contracts are coming to an end. And pretty much anybody who's providing energy is going to be able to start saying, oh yeah, we're clean too. And so that leaves you with a question of, well, what is our value proposition gonna be? Or what should it be? And you know, what really differentiates us? Because you do compete for customers. And so what is gonna differentiate you? And so one of the things we want to look at is what might a new sustainable value proposition be for you? So when the ad hoc committee meeting and senior staff met in August, we did just kind of a brainstorm to say, well, what are some of the factors that we might consider? So this is unformed, it's incomplete, but we just wanted to introduce them to you. You know, and you'll see there's a lot of overlap with your critical questions that we're driving towards. For example, if you were to really drive and be first to some kind of a 24/7 solution, that would be a real distinguishing factor for you. Really set you apart. Your nonprofit structure is compared, for example, to PG&E or for large energy providers that you also compete against. Your local focus could be, so the way you're directly tied to each of you, the local cities. There are ways you could really play up that local aspect. Innovation has come up many times this evening and could continue. So, you know, you could really say we really focus on where we can innovate and be first to show how something could work. And we're always going to be looking at lifting that up. Customer-centric approach. I think that speaks for itself, really being on top of that and known for that, where the community says, you know, PCE always gets me what I need. Actually, the concierge model might play into something like that. Affordability is a possibility. Again, that is part of your questions you need to resolve. Trust and transparency, that might fit with customer relationships, and being nimble and efficient, that fits with some of these. So these are some of the factors, but again, what I'm putting before you is that what you've been known for and what you've been great at is not going to distinguish you so much in the future. And it's going to be important for you to think about, what do we want to distinguish us in the future? So I'll just pause and see if you can have reactions. We have some time. Yeah.
Well, another one would just be, we're the original, we're the first. Just marketing the fact that we were trusted and here long before everybody else.
Yeah.
Just as a
Kind of the trailblazer. in the history.
pioneer.
Yeah.
I would say a not-for-profit structure, you think about it as not really community reinvestment, community investment. Gets so much of everything else, because we're investing in the community. We are not for profit, you know. Underscore, we're not PG&E, right? You know, that's what we're thinking. We don't have to say it. But resilience, microgrids, financial relief for low income people, however you define that. Just giving back a trust, innovation, all of that is investing in the community. So I think that could be a good value proposition.
That's great.
Yes.
Thank you. I kind of want to yes and Director Ragsdale's comments right now, and just because I did notice when looking through this that I felt, and I apologize for harping on this maybe, but I feel like it's our programs. That's like, we're already doing that. Like, we've already begun distinguishing ourselves in a new way by offering these programs that invest in our community. And I want to make sure that that's part of our future value proposition, maybe a little more explicitly, because I think earlier when I saw local focus on this list, I thought, yeah, local focus. You know, we're serving our community, but I do think it's these programs that are, I think, already that are tackling some of the challenges our community is facing as times change. Reach codes, the concierge service, figuring out what our community's next step can be, and being there to help them get there is is a huge part of how we can distinguish ourselves.
Thanks.
Thank you. Actually, I like what Kaya said earlier, and I had in my head where we've been and where we're going. But these value propositions, customer centric, resonate most with me because it strikes me as an all of the above. We're customer centric, we're making sure you get the best deal. We're customer centric, we're making sure you have a planet to live on, and we're customer centric, we're making sure it's easy for you to obtain all that and more. So that's where I gravitate.
I was actually just telling Tom that as I was sitting here thinking about it in terms of customer centric, it would be interesting to talk to the Assemblywoman and the Senator about putting a law in place that basically says if a renter in a single family home wants to decarbonize, the owner of the property, and they're gonna pay for it and work with incentives, the owner of the property cannot prevent them from doing that. It'd be an interesting law.
Please work with both our assembly
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. So, sorry, that doesn't really apply to this, but I was like, customer centric, show might work. I mean, and I don't think it's a bad thing for the homeowner, they get all these upgrades, you know, but
Property value
I just
stuff.
don't like that they can't, they could stop you from doing it, so. Yes, we have Director Dugan.
Oh, yeah, I really resonate with the customer centric as well. But I really think of it as really customer centric. I mean, we are their agent, right? Like we are what they are doing for climate change. And I really like that messaging because, I firmly believe PCE is, like, if you look at my life, it's probably 80% of what I'm doing for climate change, not what I'm doing here, but just the fact all my electricity is clean. I mean, that's huge. And I just don't think people really get that. And, we're their agent in that. And I think that brings them along, and I can't imagine a clear differentiation in whatever the heck PG&E is doing, right? So that's how I think about it. We are what you are doing for climate change.
I think that's a really interesting point about PG&E, because I don't know if any of you troll next door occasionally, I know. From here. Me, it's bajillion on the next door. So it's kind of the mean company is trolling the mean people. It's really mean. So damn it, but at any rate, I noticed they're trying to like say, we just saw the great things we're doing. And if we don't get ahead of that, like actually they think they're good, but we're even better. It could be a game changer on marketing.
PG&E is not gonna change its image through next door.
I totally. Yes, I have Director Al's hand up.
Thank you. I feel like we've kind of, some of the things we've been talking about tonight, I think point in this direction where I think we go beyond being customer centric, where we're turning our customers into our partners. A virtual power plant is about taking power back from the customers when it's opportune for them to give it back to us. And the concierge service is us reaching out and making sure that people have everything they need to electrify and frankly become nodes on our virtual power plant. I've been saying this for years. I think the VPP is again, it's sort of a really central principle, a central component of our future model, where we're not just a traditional utility that buys wholesale power and sells it to retails at sells to customers at a slight profit, where we're a market maker for the electricity, where we have a lot of producers and we have EVs that can run in both directions, and even houses with Tesla Powerwalls and other batteries that can run in both directions. And we become the broker where that power flows back and forth. And if we're smart about it, we can make money at it. So I think that, again, I think we go beyond being customer centric to, again, it's almost a partnering approach with a subset of our customers. And really much better, closer, more focused service on the customers who are not partners.
Yeah, that's good.
Good, thank you. That was great to get some quick hits, and those were great quick hits.
Let me see if there's any public comment on that. Feel free to write in your thoughts, if you have more. In fact,
We ain't PG
Just have said.
Don't get me started.
and their board of directors.
Yeah, put that on next door.
Just compliment. Just saying how brilliant you all are.
It's easier to be a good guy.
So then there's just one more thing. So when we come back in January with proposals for policies you can adopt about these difficult questions, there's information you need, but there's also guidelines, like what is going to drive your questions. And we have started a list of criteria for that. And again, this was something that was done really as a brainstorm, and we're going to shape these criteria much better. So I just want you to see this first pass so that you know we're going to come back with it. What's great about this, you know, we've been talking about, especially Sean was talking about the need for there to be some flexibility. You know, you don't want to adopt something in January that you're locked into for 5 years and you can't make any changes. And one of the tools, the central tool for flexibility, one is adopting kind of broad policy so that it's directional, and that's what we talked about tonight. But the other is to know what your decision-making criteria are. When we need to adapt and make changes, especially bigger changes, what are the criteria we need to make sure we're thinking about, that we're waiting, so that we can be thoughtful and thorough and grounded as we do make ongoing decisions. And so we have kind of a starting list. And again, we're going to change this a lot. This is kind of too many and kind of too messy and not precise enough in some ways, maybe too precise in other ways. So I just wanted you to see this idea of what this kind of list of decision-making criteria can